This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate first part of What If Naruto Awakens Sparda's Blood in Forest of Death. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto screamed silently as the anonymous Kusaku no Ichi used the Gogyo Fuin, 5 elements sealing technique. To push her hand into his stomach, he experienced an amazing burning sensation that he had never experienced before. He raised his head and used the word woman to give the snake a fierce glare that caused her to respond with a hollow laugh. Coo. She chuckled. However, she was taken aback on the inside. She had anticipated that the boy would have fainted upon coming into close contact with the seal. However, it was unexpected to still be awake. Albeit barely, she sensed that this boy was going to cause trouble down the road. Furthermore, Sasuke had been partially roused from his cowardly thoughts by this boy. If her final plan were to succeed, she would not be able to influence Sasuke, which this boy possessed. She smiled and said, "Goodbye, boy," tossing him over the branch. He was starting to stumble. Sasuke noticed this. "No, Naruto," was his silent thought. He swiftly and delicately pulled out a kunai and hurled it, but he was not lucky because the kunai failed to hit its target. Sakura yelled, "Naruto," as he collapsed. "This can't be happening." She silently prayed for Naruto's survival. Even though he was a pain, he didn't deserve to pass away in this manner. Sasuke was already on his last legs when she turned to face the battle ahead and witnessed its savagery. Perhaps Naruto was the most secure of them all. With Naruto. As Naruto gazed at the battle raging above him, he thought, No, before it swiftly disappeared from view. "This can't be how it ends. I still have dreams to accomplish," he thought as he saw the Hokage monument and the Sandaime Hokage's hat. Flashing through were pictures of Sakura, Kakashi, and Sakura. "I have to help and be with my friends." Images of Konohamaru and his companions appeared. There was an image of Hokage Oji-san. He screamed as he fell further, "I won't die, I've got too much left to do." He suddenly experienced a surge of energy. It felt so new. The power, it was more potent than Kyuubi's chakra, but it was still warm. It seemed, dare he say it, natural, as if it were a part of him and intended exclusively for him. The sensation continued to grow. The world darkened just as he thought it was about to reach its zenith. His body kept falling until it struck the earth below. On the other hand, anyone looking down from above would have witnessed a flash of white light followed by total darkness. Unknown place. Let it drip, let it drip. The young blue-eyed genin woke up to these noises. He noticed that his hand was submerged in water but not drenched. His clothes were also dry. He looked around the room. The walls had red borders, and the color was a drab yellow, but he was unable to distinguish between the dull red light that seeped into the room and the actual boarding. Was he still alive? He was not entirely certain. He immediately decided that the Shinigami, or whatever realm he was in, needed a better paint job if he was dead, because he would not be spending the rest of eternity in a garbage heap. "Well, this sucks," he muttered to himself. Bang! He got up slowly and started down the hallway, asking himself, what the fuck was that? He became aware of how unsettling the hallway was as he moved. It brought back memories of his childhood sneaking into that R-rated horror film. The men in the film were such fools. They consistently broke up and engaged in inappropriate behavior. They were always killed when they went down the eerie hall by themselves. They went into a panic. Their heads were severed. They stabbed the other person in the back after having sex. In his opinion, they were all complete idiots. When the hallway he had been walking down opened up into a spacious room, his inner monologue was interrupted. The room's large set of bars in the back was its most obvious feature. The light from the room is reflected by the cold steel. It was pitch dark behind them, but what surprised him the most was what he saw. He was in the room with 3 men, while one was lying in the water. The other was laughing. The third man was merely resting against the cage's bars. He saw that they looked better as he approached. The man who was laughing had on a red coat, the sleeves of which were rolled up to show off his black undershirt sleeves. There were 3 buckles on the front of that shirt. The light in the room was reflected by his silver belt and black fingerless gloves. In addition, he wore brown and black boots and black leather pants. He had a rough face. His hair was silver, and his eyes were a cold blue. The laughing man was getting a glare from the person being laughed at. He had an odd insignia on the shoulders of his purple-blue coat. A navy blue muscle shirt and a red zip-up hoodie were underneath the coat. He had 2 rings on his left hand. He was dressed in black combat boots and blue pants. There was still some baby fat on his face. He also had silver hair and icy blue eyes, but it was his arm that stood out the most. The arm was red and had blue, glowing veins overall. It had a demonic appearance. The man appeared to be tuning out the outside world as he leaned against the bar. He had 3 tail-like patterns hanging in the back of his long blue trench coat. There were dark blue pants and a dark blue vest underneath it. He had brown combat boots as well, if he had to guess. He had icy blue eyes and a face that resembled the laughing man's. Why did all of them have icy blue eyes? Kami-sama? Like the other 2, he had silver hair, but it was brushed back, giving it spikes in the back, rather than flat at first glance. He appeared somewhat stiff, like a nobleman. Naruto started to hear more of their conversation as he kept moving. Alongside the men, "Oh, God!" exclaimed the man who had ceased to laugh. "Kid, you should have seen your face just now." The kid yells, "Shut it, you ass," while still in the water. "You don't ask another person that." The man shrugged and said, "What, all I did was ask if the sex was good or not." The blushing kid interrupted him, saying, "Christ, it's a yes or no answer. No need for details, of course, unless you want to share then." "That's exactly what you shouldn't ask. How would you feel if I asked how it was with Trish and Lady?" "I wouldn't mind, by the way." He thought it was great, especially when they both. "Enough," said the one with the noble appearance. He caught the attention of both men. His eyes opened, they were staring at each other. Both men turned their heads in the direction he was looking and saw their guest waiting. "Our guest has arrived." The frayed orange jumpsuit caught their attention right away. The most obvious feature of him was how bright it was. How couldn't they? Then they noticed that there was still a lot of baby fat on his face. He had azure blue eyes and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. He was tan. 2, they didn't see it every day. His cheeks were flushed now, most likely from listening to their lovely chatter. Without uttering a word, they gazed at one another. In essence, they were forming opinions and assessing one another. The man who had been laughing now grinned and moved in the boy's direction, reaching behind him. He wrapped his arm around his shoulder and burst out laughing once more. The boy dismissed him and threw his fist in the air, pointing at the man who only seemed amused at his rage. "Well," he finally said, his voice brimming with conceit, "this is kid as him, eh? Not what I expected. Shouldn't he be a badass or something? This kid looks like he wets himself at night." "Fuck you." The boy yelled. The man merely grinned amusingly and, before Naruto could blink, he reappeared behind him, his arm wrapped around Naruto once more. "I haven't wet the bed since I was 6 and my name isn't Kid, it's Uzumaki Naruto Dadbeo, the next Hokage of Konoha." He let go of Naruto and turned to face the other 2 men, saying, "You know, I think I'm gonna like you, kid." As the other proclaimed, "Kid," got off the ground. The noble-looking man moved away from the bars to join the other 2. The trio stood next to each other. He raised his voice once more. "The kid," then said, "Well, I guess I should tell you my name as well. Name's Dante Sparda." "I'm Nero," he said plainly. Dante replied with a smile, "Sorry about before, but as I'm sure you're already aware, Dante is an ass." The man with the noble appearance sighed, as if he had had enough of the other 2 at last. He said something. He said, "And I am Virgil Sparda," in a tone of authority. Naruto continued to stare. "Well, that's good and all," Naruto uttered. He didn't give a damn, really. In any case, they were dead. The trio in front of him appeared perplexed, including Virgil for once. "So, where are we? Heaven? Hell? Limbo maybe?" he asked. "Come on, we're dead, aren't we? What is this, how you pick on the new guy? Guess which part of heaven or hell you're in." Dante and Nero attempted, but were unable to contain their laughter. The child believed him dead. Virgil, meanwhile, rubbed his temple and sighed. Both his brother and a distant relative were total moron. He made the decision to break the news to Naruto on his own. He said, "Naruto," attempting to remain calm, "you're not dead." Naruto merely gazed for a moment. "What, you're lying? I mean, I fell from a kami knows how high tree to solid ground. Not only that, but I'm in this shithole." Dante collected himself enough to say something. "Kid, this supposed shithole is actually your mind." He laughed by this point. Nero had also stopped laughing. "And you're alive, just kind of bashed up right now." Dante nodded and asked, "So I'm not dead? Yada." Was Naruto's voice. His dreams could still be fulfilled. "Wait, if I'm alive, then why the hell are you guys here?" he asked himself after giving it some thought. "Wait, is this Kaibi playing a trick?" "Shut up." Kyuubi was most likely attempting to persuade him to take off the seal. He hadn't even attempted to get in touch with Kyuubi. To be honest, it hadn't seemed worth the effort to him. He had been warned by Hokage Oji-san not to approach Kyuubi since he would probably try to fool him into taking off the seal. He claimed that if the seal was broken, Kyuubi would escape and Naruto would perish. He was not allowed to have that. However, a loud roar stopped the men before they could respond. Massive waves were created as the roar reverberated throughout the space while the 3 men held their ground. Naruto was pushed back a little as the waves crashed up against him. Red eyes with a black, silted pupil looked into the room from behind the bars. The beast flashed its fangs at them. "Do not compare me to them," growled the beast. The beast gave another ominous roar. "I am almighty and they are mere peons. I can crush mountains, create mass tsunamis, just with a swipe of one of my magnificent tails. They're nothing," it roared. Dante made an intriguing impression of the creature by mimicking, "I am almighty and they are mere peons." I can crush mountains with just a swipe of one of my magnificent tails. I am blah, blah, blah. Just shut up, you overgrown carpet, don't make me come in there, I'll make you into my new fur-skinned rug, you jackass. It barked at Dante. A huge set of claws struck the cage abruptly. Seemingly attempting to escape, Dante simply turned to laugh at Naruto. As you can see, that furball in there is Kyuubi. As for who we are, Naruto, that's a different story entirely, Nero said. Crossing his arms, Naruto looked on in confusion as he said, I suppose you could say we are your ancestors. His ancestors were these men, however. I suppose they were. He could see where Dante's rebellious attitude had come from by looking at him. He was about to tell the fuzzbutt off, but Dante got there first. You still haven't answered why you're in my head though, Naruto remarked as he tapped the ground in anticipation of a response. Without a doubt, he thought these men were his ancestors, but ancestors should not be in his mind. They should be dead. He was aware of that as well. Those who knew Virgil would have been shocked to see the smile on his face. He appreciated that it was direct based on his initial impression. He had initially assumed that this boy would be exactly like Dante, but he had enough common sense to avoid getting sucked into the moment. Of course he would. We're here, he said, to talk to you about activating your bloodlines. Naruto's expression changed to one of disbelief. He had a blood limit, or Kekkei Genkai, no wait. 2 Kekkei Genkai, to be precise, because he lacked any family techniques. He was viewed as a clan-less loser. However, according to his ancestors, he possessed a Kekkei Genkai. There was only one thought. His cries of, I'm the greatest, and, take that Teme, made Dante and Nero laugh. Ha, take that Sasuke Teme. You've got your precious Sharingan, Mirror Wheel, and your damned Kaden, Fire Release, Ninjutsu, but I got 2 Kekkei Genkai. Take that. He began to do an embarrassing dance. Virgil's face was palmed too soon. He had thought perhaps this is another Dante father. Please assist him, having had enough of this stupidity. Virgil came up behind Naruto and grabbed him. He turned Naruto to look at him. Enough of this foolishness, he said bluntly, daring Naruto to try again. He glared at him. Do you want to know about your, how did you pronounce it, Kekkei Genkai, or not? Naruto was quite excellent. It appeared that he understood. He walked back to Dante and Nero after dropping Naruto into the water. Nero shot him a disapproving look, and Dante just smiled as usual. He appeared to have mastered that habit lately. Most likely, it was just to make him angry. Naruto had just finished pulling himself off the ground. When he turned to face him, he had an expectant expression. Well, said Naruto, what are they? Be patient, kid, says Dante. Another roar came from behind them. To understand our bloodline, you have to know about its history and know that it isn't exactly a quote-unquote bloodline, but actually who you are. To put it simply, we want to make you into what is called a half-devil, like us. He made quotation marks with his hands. Kyuubi, who had remained silent since his previous remark, appeared surprised and asked, what, you 3 are Sparda's kin? Duh, Nero said with a shrug. We said that at the beginning, you idiot fox. Seriously, you would think with your huge ass ears you could hear what we said very well. Watch your tongue. Kyuubi seemed to be offended. It quickly shifted its gaze from Nero to Naruto and said, I respect your power and acknowledge that you are stronger than I, but I will not be disrespected. If animals could smirk, Naruto was certain that Kitsune was. To think, this boy is a descendant of you 3 in Sparda. Well, now isn't this interesting? Virgil said, be silent, fox, and let us continue. Without looking back to acknowledge the beast, Kyuubi stopped talking. Naruto was amazed that he could use only words to silence Kyuubi. The Teme would go on and on. He thought, it would be better if we told you about our past before discussing the powers you will acquire as a half-devil. There was a full-scale conflict between humans and demons 8,000 years ago. Demons sought to eradicate humanity, while humans battled to protect it. Mundus, a strong demon prince, was in charge of the demons. Mundus desired to rule over all of humanity. He gathered an army and chose powerful demons to command them. Sparda was one of them. Sparda initially engaged in combat with humans, killing countless people with his army, but legend has it that he woke up to justice one day. He turned on Mundus and his fellow demons and fought against them. Single-handedly, he fought Mundus's armies until he finally returned to hell to defeat Mundus himself. They fought long and hard until finally he defeated Mundus. He sealed Mundus away and forced his armies to separate. He poured his entire being into his sword and sealed the portal to the demon realm. He then set demonic guards to keep the portal safe and then disappeared, only appearing in various times throughout the ages to protect humanity. Naruto listened in wonder as the story was told. Everyone believed that demons were evil, but it seems that there was once a good demon. Additionally, being his descendant only added to his awesomeness. Of course though, Dante interrupted Virgil before he could finish. Then Daddy Dearest had Virgil and I with Mom. And as for Nero, well, I really don't know where he fits into this, to be honest. Our old man probably had lovers or something in history, so maybe he's the descendant of one of his lovers, in which case, That means we have one hell of an incredibly older brother or sister somewhere out there, but whatever. Nero scowled at Dante. Even though that was probably the case, he pushed Virgil, who was glaring at him, and said, "Now the three of us had some good times. Remember that time at the Temini Gru and Mallet Island?" Virgil. "Good times, eh?" Nero, if he could, glared at Dante more. "And Nero, remember that time in Fortuna, where we rescued your woman and saved the city from some evil priest?" "Oh." Dante sighed with a phony indulgence. "The memories." Naruto became aware that he had one dysfunctional family. After observing them, there was always one of them calm and serious, another had a cocky attitude and was always silly, the other was a combination of both and was simply constantly being picked on. He questioned whether Kyuubi's portrayal of these men's strength was accurate. Nero sighed and ceased his glare. This was just Dante's behavior, and he ought to be accustomed to it by now. He faced Naruto once more. "We can tell you the abilities that come with being a half-devil, but we don't fully understand how humanity essentially regressed technologically or how humans acquired the skills they currently possess. The first ability, known as Devil Blood, is essentially the ability to heal quickly. The big guy back there gave you this ability already, but when you combine it with your half-devil healing skills, the majority of your wounds will heal almost immediately. Devil Arm is your next ability. I don't have it, but Dante and Virgil do. It lets you transform the soul of any demon you vanquish into a potent weapon that you can use in battle. Each weapon has different powers and abilities, so they're pretty damn useful to have." Nero raises his red arm and says, "The third ability, which is unique to me, is called Devil Bringer. This arm is capable of many things. You could use it as a grappling hook to swing or drag opponents toward you. Additionally, it has the ability to emit a spectral arm that you can use for a variety of purposes. It's an extremely useful tool. We'll also make it possible to turn it on and off, unlike me. Your fourth and final ability is called Devil Trigger. This ability is different between half-devils. No Devil Trigger is the same. You change based on the type of half-devil you are. For example, while these two have the full transformation, a spectral form of Sparda appears behind me. This ability basically multiplies your abilities by 2 times. It works really well in battle against some stronger opponents." While Naruto pondered in wonder, Nero was done. Could he possess all those skills? He considered every possible scenario. The majority of these ideas culminated in him wearing the formal attire of the Hokage, but before he could say anything more, Virgil felt compelled to say something. Dante and Nero were a little taken aback when Virgil said, "Actually, Nero, I believe Naruto will have one other ability that we did not have. He has a different ability than they did, even though this day and age was very different from theirs." He glared at Naruto, who appeared sheepish, and said, "Naruto, based on what I understood from the few times you did pay attention in class, Kekkei Genkai are gained through contracts with demons. Therefore, most likely, if you were to kill a demon with absolute control over darkness, you would gain Maiden, darkness release. As a result, I suppose you could call this ability Devil Assimilation." Dante suddenly reappeared beside Naruto and threw his hands in the air. "And," Dante exclaimed in a voice he had heard announcers use, "all of this can be yours if you agree to become a half-devil." Virgil frowned at his twins' antics for what seemed like the 100th time today. In fact, Nero and Naruto laughed thus. These were the skills he would acquire. This would undoubtedly assist him in becoming Hokage. Possibly the greatest Hokage in existence. He would be able to protect all of his friends and grow stronger. There was no doubt that he would agree. However, Naruto then recalled something. Nero lowered his gaze, Dante averted his gaze, and Virgil simply gazed. "Anyo, but didn't you say I have 2 Kekkei Genkai?" "Sorry," said Nero, "but we don't know much about the second one exactly. The only thing I can find searching in your memories about it was something you briefly learned in your academy." Virgil calmly replied. Kyuubi gasped before he could say another word. "I think its name was the Rinnegan, Samsara Eye. Based on what you sensei said, but it was only supposed to be a legend from what I've gathered." He was beckoned to explain his gasp by the 4 who turned to face him. "He has that blasted dojutsu, eye technique." After a moment of contemplation, he appeared to be struck in the face by realization. "Blasted. I can't believe this didn't cross my fucking thought process before. The Uzumaki are related to the Senju, who like the Uchida, are the damn descendants of the Rakudo Sennin, Sage of 6 Paths. And who the fuck," Dante said intensely, "is this Rakudo whatever? You twit, Rakudo Sennin. There's a legend behind him, one that I am technically a part of, and it also involves Mundus." Virgil was absolutely correct in his theory that Kekkei Genkai originated from human-demon contracts. However, it began some 1,000 years ago. A young boy was playing next to a statue of Mundus. After humanity had recovered from its decline, he spoke to the boy using that statue as an avatar. He offered the boy the ability to alter the course of history in return for performing a favor for Mundus. Whenever he called upon it, the boy foolishly took the Rinnegan and got it. After learning that humans possessed chakra, which is essentially a distorted version of yokai, The boy decided to teach people how to use chakra. He was revered by the people as a living god who could perform miracles and assist those in need. However, he started to question why he should have all the power, so he took a few disciples who, after completing their training, went off on their own and started teaching others. When the Sennin was older, he once heard Mundus call from a distance, instructing him to go back to the statue where they had first met in order to get his job. Upon his return, Mundus instructed him to start wiping out humanity before locating and releasing the seal that bound him to the demon world, knowing that it would spell the end of everything. The Sennin declined. Man disregarded Mundus's outbursts about how he owed him the power and how he gave it to him, thinking he had heard the last of Mundus. He destroyed the statue and walked away. He hadn't. Mundus was, to put it mildly, enraged. About a year later, after he had anticipated that the Sennin would lower his guard, he used some of the power he could extract from one of his avatar statues to release a seal he had placed on one of his former generals, who had betrayed him before Sparda. Unlike Sparda, however, he did it for power. He was a devil named Jubi. Mundus used his powers to warp Jubi into his demon form and went on a rampage for weeks in search of the Sennin. The two met on the battlefield. Following weeks of searching, days passed while they fought, neither of them giving up. The Sennin eventually used one of his powers to extract Jubi's soul after sufficiently weakening him. After sealing it inside himself, he used his ability to control gravity to launch his body into a rock and send it to the moon, where it crashed and was permanently sealed. The Sennin changed the seal so that when he died, Jubi's power would be divided and sent into animals. As a result, on the day of his death, I received the majority of the power sent out and became the great being I am today. Eventually, humans figured out how to seal demons again, and the rest is history. The Sennin grew older and had two sons, who would go on to create the Uchida and Senju clans, respectively. The Rinnegan has a wide range of skills. Since I am aware of all of its capabilities, I would be happy to eventually share them with you. Godly manipulation over all 5 elements and some over gravity is the current one, though, that I believe will be most helpful to you in contrast to what the original wielder had to endure while wearing it. I'll also enable it to be turned on and off. Additionally, I will become your first devil arm in return for a little freedom. The Rinnegan, which Kyubi claimed was likely the strongest Kekkei Genkai in existence, had godlike control over the 5 elements and gravity, and he could learn and create tons of freaking jutsu with it. Kyubi also offered to become his first devil arm, and since devil assimilation allowed him to use all of Kyubi's chakra, it was a win-win situation. Naruto actually looked shocked as he tried to process everything. Virgil posed the query that was on the minds of the 3 half-devils at the time, while Naruto was deep in thought. Why are you willing to help him? He was all too aware that demons were cunning and that it was not their custom to simply give up their power to anybody. There was even an unwritten rule that if you made contact with a Sparda, you would be shunned by the demon community. Because I know what's going to happen if I don't, the beast said, glaring at them. He simply grew stronger and came to take my power by force. He most likely wouldn't even grant me a small degree of autonomy, such as letting me experience things through his senses. Secondly, he shares your Sparda heritage. That is something I have to respect, in my opinion. Although I disagree with Dante and Nero's protect human nonsense, I am aware of Sparda's renowned strength. Lastly, I've seen this kid. Even without the power you're giving him, even if I tried, I couldn't corrupt him enough to remove the seal. He would simply resist more with this power. The 3 of them turned to face Naruto, who appeared to have made up his mind, and said, at least with this, I can get some form of freedom. He turned to his ancestors and said, all right, I accept these gifts. I promise you 3 that I will do my best to live up to yours and Sparda's name. The 3 appeared content. I also promise to you, Kyubi, he said to the demon, that if you become my devil arm and help me learn about the Rinnegan, then I will allow you access to my senses. I promise you this on my Nindo, and if I return to that Nindo in any way, I'll let you eat my soul and take my body. The demon's expression changed from one of shock to one of satisfaction. He knew this child would be fascinating. I have no doubt that you will live up to our name. Welcome to the family, kid, Dante said. However, we neglected to mention one brief point. We will tell you about some of our weapons and where they are concealed, weapons such as Yamamoto and Rebellion. I'll give you information so you can use Sparda's arm correctly and make Red Queen and Blue Rose. Nero started. I really couldn't conceal them in tombs like Dante and Virgil did. They approach Naruto and put their hands on his chest, saying, I hope you can find use for them. Before Naruto could inquire what he meant, Dante hurriedly counted down, saying, oh, by the way, you may get a bit of our personality traits. 3, 2, 1. Good luck, youngster. After that, they gave Naruto everything they had. Kyubi roared in the background, fulfilling his promise, and he felt that natural power flowing through him once more. When Kyubi's chakra was added, the power seemed limitless. He screamed. A little white light appeared, and then Naruto's world turned black. Forest floor, forest of death. Hours later, he opened his eyes groggily. This was not what he had anticipated. Neither the Tamiz nor he had ever told him how painful the process would be. He looked around, moving his head from side to side. He could tell it was daytime from the light peeking through the trees. Even though it was only a little, it was probably the next day, which meant his team had roughly 3 more days to get to the tower before failing the test, which was not going to happen. Pushing himself off the floor, he looked around and saw that he had landed close to a small pond, that there were trees all around him, some of which had fallen down, and that straight ahead was what appeared to be a small path that led down a section of the woods that looked demonic, but from what he could tell, that was also the direction he needed to go. He knew that his teammates had survived because Sasuke wouldn't be killed yet without killing the guy he was looking for, and he would also, despite his strong reluctance, keep Sakura alive before moving down the path. Though, he decided to look at his reflection in the creek, and was taken aback. It was as if he was staring at someone else. His face, and probably the rest of his body, had gone pale like his ancestors. His face had only lost a small amount of its baby fat. His cheeks still had the whisker-like marks. His hair was still spiked, but it was now silver like the rest of his family, almost like Kakashi's hair, only shinier. His eyes had taken on the icy blue of his ancestors, and all in all, he liked his new face. He looked down and saw that his jacket didn't fit him well. He quickly unzipped it and discovered that his torso had grown somewhat, making him somewhat taller. He also noticed that he had developed an impressive six-pack. Seeing that his orange jacket would not fit, he threw it away, leaving him with a barely fitting orange pair of pants and a blue muscle shirt. He was definitely in need of new clothes, and he also noticed that he had a fox head tattoo on his left pectoral. "It's me, Kyuubi. Good to see you noticed my sealed form, Kit." He searched the area for the voice but was unsuccessful from the new seal. "I am speaking to you and I will be able to communicate thanks to this," Naruto said. "Good to know," observing that his voice was a little deeper than usual. "Instead of talking, you ought to consider communicating. We don't want people to think you're a crazy person, even though no one is around right now." "Right," he said plainly. "Do you see that demonic presence here, too?" This part of the forest had seemed strangely demonic to him ever since he woke up, and he assumed this was due to the enhanced senses he had acquired following the transformation. He also sensed a significant amount of demonic energy in the vicinity. "Yes, it's most likely a demon-like plant. Given that my devil arm is based on fire, it will be simple. The source is directly in front of you to locate it. Simply follow the eerie route marked by trees that resemble demons." "I chose the ideal spot to land, didn't I?" He started to move forward while muttering to himself. "Maybe you should practice using Devil Bringer and my weapon before continuing." "Hold on." Naruto halted. "Using your cage bunshin to bombard demons won't accomplish much." "Hey, that wasn't all I had before." He was a demon who had been imprisoned inside Naruto since birth. Damn it. He knew every detail about his former jailer, including his skill set. Bullshit, and you know it. Really, who did this kid think he was fooling? "Fine, I'll practice first." Naruto turned around and walked back to the center of the clearing, where he summoned Devil Bringer. He saw that his Devil Bringer arm was black, with red veins and red claws that made up his fingers. He honestly thought it looked pretty sweet at first. It felt a little different from his normal arm, but he quickly adjusted. With a quick uppercut to the air, he pretended to grab an enemy and slammed down, using some of the energy from his arm as a booster to increase the force of the slam, which would be useful for knocking someone out or, if he had enough force, smashing their head in. He quickly moved his arm back to its normal position at his side, and then he shot it forward, causing an ethereal hand to shoot forward like a grapple. Grabbing someone from a distance would also be useful, so he decided to try to make the larger ethereal arm later. Good, everything went smoothly so far. As he prepared to test his first devil arm, he smiled, wondering what Kyuubi would become. Well, the only way to find out was to give it a shot. "Kyuubi!" he yelled, and the air around both of his hands suddenly twisted, revealing something startling. Kyuubi was a pair of 8-bladed chakrams, round, with bladed round edges, and 8 spear tips sticking out of them. Sharp to the very tips, the metal in the blades was black, with red metal surrounding the inside, a black cross for holding the weapon, and red circles connecting them to 4 of the spikes. Overall, he thought it looked pretty cool. "Thanks, Kit." "Really? Why did everyone want their fucking devil arm to be a godforsaken sword?" "Now, here's a quick lesson in wielding me." To be honest, he was expecting some sort of sword or something, but this was also neat. "I can be used in melee combat, thrown at adversaries like a boomerang, and wielded like a shield to block attacks. One unique quality about me is that I can light on fire like so." The chakrams caught fire, rolling up Naruto's arms as well. At first, he thought they would burn, but they didn't. "Don't worry, these flames won't burn you. Only your enemies. Try to throw me around, kid." Naruto followed instructions. and after hurling himself at two distinct trees, they flew in the direction of their targets, brushed past them, leaving scratches and scorch marks on the trees, and came back. He caught them without hesitation, saying, "At least you know how to throw them. We can probably leave now." "What? I was expecting you to teach me more moves." "I will, too, but you'll also pick up a few in real combat. It's also a positive experience, and spill a lot of blood with me. I get stronger the more you shed." Naruto said, "Will do, Kyuubi," and stopped just in front of the trail's entrance. "Well then, let's rock." Naruto smiled and started down the path. After 5 minutes, "You would think a fucking plant demon would take care of the forest," he said, observing that many of the trees along the path were either discolored or appeared to be completely broken. "Rather, this place looks like shit." Few people may have known, but Naruto really enjoyed gardening. He had a few followers and a lot of other plants on his windowsill at home, and he would freak out when he saw a garden in poor condition. The only reason no one knew was that he never went to the Yamanaka's flower shop, because if he did, Ino would tell everyone, and to be honest, he didn't want to deal with the ensuing shitstorm. "I know I'm new to the whole demon hunting business, but this is just insulting." Naruto raised an eyebrow as something that reminded him of a brown sack emerged from some nearby bushes. It was made of burlap, had a blade on its arm, and had a face that kind of reminded him of a clown if Dante's and Nero's memories served him correctly. "This was an armed scarecrow. Just one of you was sent to pursue me." "Oh," it gave a little cry, and then all of a sudden, there were about 6 armed scarecrows, and more of them emerged through the portals as black circles on the ground emitted black light. Naruto sighed, "Great, me and my big mouth," and extended his arms. "Kyuubi," he muttered, and then the red and black chakrams materialized in his hands. "Well, if you're all so intent on fighting, then let's get crazy." On their way back, Naruto ignited the weapons, threw them quickly at their targets, and grabbed them. Then, he appeared beneath the 2 airborne scarecrows and leapt up in a spinning motion, his arms reaching their full reach. Suddenly, the air around him ignited, creating an airborne fire cyclone. The cyclone exploded, sending both scarecrows crashing to the ground. They tried to stand up, but the flames made them weak and they dissolved into nothing, and unharmed Naruto fell to the ground with a smirk on his face. "I officially take back any original thoughts I had about this not being cool." 4 more departed. Time for a bit of melee, he thought, and he rushed forward right into the group, slapping at the scarecrow in front of him back and forth, hitting him constantly. Then, using his newly developed 6th sense, he quickly turned around and parried the attack, throwing the chakram he wasn't parrying with and throwing the burlap-colored demon up into the air. He then leapt up and viciously slashed at it with the weapons, turning it to ash as it fell to the ground. Landing next to it and picking it up suddenly, he staggered forward after a slash to the back. Kami. That hurt like a bitch. He could already feel the wound healing, but his shirt wouldn't. He got a tick mark on the back of his head when he saw them simply standing there. Now there's going to be hell to pay. "Well, it looks like they couldn't stay for the party that demon's throwing. Too bad. It looks to be a real promising bash," Naruto bellowed as he hurried forward and spun around in the center of the group on the ground. Once more, a fiery cyclone swirled around his spinning form, and his chakrams cut the scarecrow while the fire burned them. The cyclone exploded, forcing the enemies away, and when their bodies hit the ground, they turned to ash. He laughed at his own joke. Hopefully the other guests don't burn this easily, though apparently Dante was right. He did get a bit of their personalities, but Kyuubi's words interrupted him. "Not bad for a beginner," Kyuubi said lightly, adding, "I'm so surprised you did it so easily, not to mention without using your damned cage bunshin. I'm impressed." "Are you certain that you are Kyuubi?" "I don't know. You seem like a nice person." He was told that the Kyuubi no Yoko was a creature of pure hatred and that he would essentially burn down a town for the mere act of breathing in his presence, but this guy is being kind enough. He couldn't get it out of his head. "Yes, I'm not nice to other people nonetheless. You are different in a few ways. First, you are half a demon. Only demons of equal rank or higher will receive some respect from me because I detest humans. As a half-devil, you might be regarded as being on par with me or even higher. You are a Sparda. To start, throughout history in the demon world, they were feared. Only brain-dead demons desire glory by vanquishing them, or someone like Mundus wants to have sex with them. Third, and last, I started out trapped in a seal. I could have attempted to corrupt you, but I can see from your memories that it would not have been feasible. I respect that in itself. At last, you believe that I would fulfill my promise, kid. That's not what I would have expected from you. Your life is miserable because of me. That was enough to make me believe in you, even if you were still a human. Kyuubi, I'm touched. I believe we just experienced our first romantic moment together. This is a fantastic starting point for developing a genuine friendship. You bastard, you just ruined the moment. Furthermore, don't expect this to occur once more. I remain the legendary Kyuubi no Yoko. Yes, you are, Naruto said, shaking his head as he continued down the trail. He started to think that he should move more quickly because Sakura and Sasuke probably thought he was dead. In addition, he wanted to get some supplies to build his new gadgets already, and he would likely need to borrow some yen from Hokage Oji-san. If not, he might have to have Konohamaru steal some money from his clan vault to help fund his project and make him a gun that resembles Blue Rose, now that he had his first truly cunning idea. A few seed pods on the ground, 3 scarecrows, and a green lizard-like beast with a shield appeared suddenly. The pods near them exploded, revealing small plant-like beings that rushed to the larger demons and attached themselves, cutting him off from his thoughts as he entered a clearing with a small creek, probably leaking into the pond near where he fell. As they approached, he called forth Kyuubi and said, "Joy, now they're chimera scarecrows and a chimera assault." "Well, I guess I'll give the hedges a good trim," he said. However, he crossed the middle and index fingers with both hands and said, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique. You take the scarecrow group." He pulled out a few kunai with explosive tags and said, "Use those to stun them before you kill them." A clone appeared beside him, shifting his arm into its devil bringer form and grinning. "You know, those plants on their heads are nasty bastards." The clone simply nodded and got to work. Naruto returned his focus to the plant-infested attack in front of him and hurled his chakrams at the enemy, sending it flying. He ran beneath it, grabbed the 2 weapons, and started juggling them almost in a circle, throwing the first one twice before letting it hit the ground. Ouch, that looked like it hurt. He saw that it was getting back up. Yeah, defiantly stronger than the scarecrows, that's for sure. He spun and ignited the air around him, performing what he had just named the Jigoku no Urashi, Hell Storm, slashing and burning his opponent until it screamed in agony before shooting its roots at him, only to have them burn his opponent quickly turn to ash. Humph, too easy, probably should have taken the clones group. With a clone, of course. Boss gives me you guys, the clone sighed. Would have thought the boss would have wanted this group, but oh well. One of the scarecrow chimeras rushed him. He smirked and threw one of the kunai with an explosive tag, which struck it squarely in the chest and exploded, sending it flying backwards. He shot his arm out and pulled it back towards him with the ethereal grapple. He grabbed the head and, when the other 2 were knocked down with enough force to kill them, dispelling a minute later, he jumped toward the still flying chimera, grabbed its head, and smashed into the ground with a great deal of force, then hurried up and used Devil Bringer to smash it one last time, killing it instantly and dropping the body to the ground as it dissolved. I suppose this means Kage Bunshin transmits memories and information learned. Naruto thought, it's almost like I killed them myself. I wonder if this would be useful for training. He put it away for later and proceeded to the path close to the opposite side. 5 minutes later, as he continued down the path, he heard a rustling in the bushes, and a chimera seed leapt out and headed toward the clearing at the end of the trail. He saw that the creature was crawling toward a huge closed-up flower that was planted in the ground, and he threw a kunai with advanced precision, killing it by striking it in the head. Then, a shriek reverberated throughout the clearing, and the closed flower opened. This was the demon he was searching for, and if memory served him correctly, Dante and Nero fought her. The petals showed a woman, brown and scaled, with uncovered breasts, a pale face, and black lips. Her hair, if it could be called hair, was 2 separate scaly pieces that would resemble a tongue if they joined, and her torso was attached to petals with razor-sharp spikes. "You dare not! You killed my child and his parent in front of me," she yelled. No, she wasn't pleased. "Look, lady," Naruto remarked nonchalantly, "those things have been attempting to murder me. Your sense of justice is seriously flawed. To be honest, since I'm defending my skin, am I really the bad guy here? You're merely attempting to thwart my strategy. I will not let my ambition be denied, even though I have lain dormant for nearly 125 years. Well, that's a long time, 125 years. Just wondering if you granted Mokuton would release abilities to a boy named Hashirama Senju. He caught a glimpse of her contemplative expression. Yes, he is. Yes, I gave it to him when he was young with the understanding that he would construct this forest for me when he grew up. It was easy to fool him according to what I understand. Most people simply think he had it by fusing their water and earth chakras. Even his children were unable to duplicate it when they attempted to do so in his clan. I only made it so he could use it, unlike my other demon brethren, which is why no one could use it. It was truly brilliant. If it's a demon-made object, how can it harm other demons? It was created by a demon and could be used to appease demons, so why create something that could return to bite you in the ass? Like I would really tell you the reason, she sarcastically joked. Besides, you're going to be a new servant for one of my children. Didn't she just answer his other question? Why the fuck wouldn't she answer this one? Bring it on, bitch. You know, "You were pretty damn ugly before," she roared, and then her petaled body shot up into the air, revealing a long, scaly, green tail with a spike at the end. "You've succeeded in surpassing yourself once more. Congratulations. This woman deserves a medal." She snarled. Who would have guessed that female demons also disliked being called ugly? She whipped her tail out, and he quickly transformed his arm into the Devil Bringer, grabbing the tip of her tail with it. She was so shocked that someone had grabbed her tail that she didn't notice the world around her, so he quickly spun around and threw her at the big tree at the end of the clearing. After the impact, she snapped out of her shock and flew into the air, transforming the flower once again closed up, revealing it to be a dragon-like serpent rather than a closed flower. He'll never know how he thought it looked. Echidna's dragon form flew into the tree brush, making her less noticeable. He closed his eyes and listened to the world around him when he heard a rustling sound. Without thinking, he turned sharply and used an enlarged ethereal devil bringer to punch the demonic serpent square in the face, knocking her away from him. She spiraled in the air for a little while before flying up into the air, her tail contorting and splitting as it came to the ground to reveal a giant egg sac. He dismissed Devil Bringer and threw the chakrams forward and struck the sac, causing Echidna to scream in agony as their flames ignited it, but that didn't stop an egg from falling through and hatching to reveal a fully grown chimera seed. He summoned Kyuubi back and hurled one of the chakrams as he rushed forward to battle the seed, and as Echidna screamed in agony once more, Naruto began slashing the seed with his ignited weapon, setting it on fire, then smacked it into the air and, after instantly activating Devil Bringer, grabbed his head and smashed it down, creating a killing impact. The other chakram flew back just as Echidna closed her body and whipped out her tail, slamming him into a tree, and as he stood up, she flew toward him and smacked at him once more. Naruto jumped right over it and threw a kunai that struck her in the face. She pulled it out and saw the explosive note, but before she could dispose of it, it exploded, and Naruto erupted. He rushed forward, rolled to the left as a spike emerged from the ground trying to pierce him, and threw one of the chakrams at her, hitting her right in the chest like a flaming buzzsaw of death, narrowly avoiding another spike, and began slashing away at her, grabbing the other one and spinning, activating Jigoku no Urashi, Hell Storm. The plant demon flew up into the air and came straight down, burying her tail in the ground as he had first discovered her. He felt an attack from behind, so he leapt into the air and as her body passed, fell on top of it, and made several slashing motions on her body. She let out a terrible wail as she flew into the air to get him off of her. The petals snapped shut, forcing him away from her, and she flew into the forest in her serpent form once more. He quickly avoided an attempt to hit him by rolling to the left, and when he looked to the side, he saw her tail entering the forest. "So, have you finished your tantrum yet? You dare not. It's unbelievable that you've made me go this far." A gold energy encircled her form, and Naruto arched an eyebrow. "Are you a Super Saiyan? A short man with black hair and a tail threw a fit in another universe about someone not knowing about Saiyans, and their great power." He pondered what he had said, wondering what the fuck was a Super Saiyan. It sounded pretty fucking stupid to him, but he didn't know when he was back with Naruto. The insult seemed to stick for some reason because she didn't like it. She seemed to have doubled her strength, and he jumped to the right, but she ran straight into him. He clamped his hands on hers and pushed back, and when they came to a complete stop, he slashed at her face with a chakram. She slapped him away with her hair and threw the chakrams at the seeds, cutting them before returning to him. He landed on his knee and looked up to see her coming down, her egg sac once again visible. He quickly performed a seal and exclaimed, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." The sac proved to be a little more challenging this time because it produced eggs more quickly. Oh, great. While he concentrated on the sac, he made 3 clones who activated their Devil Bringer to deal with the swift egg rush. Ignoring the hatched eggs, he rushed forward and slashed at her sac repeatedly before unleashing a Jigoku no Urashi that burned the sac and anything that might have been beneath it. She swiftly closed the sac area once more, but before she could get away, a clone grabbed her tail with their Devil Bringer, spun around, and fired her at a clone that had just leapt into the air. He cupped his fists together and brought them down like a hammer, smashing her tail first into the ground. Naruto then charged forward, delivering a final Jigoku no Urashi and a few more well-placed slashes before jumping back, leaving Echidna exhausted. How in the world could she lose to him? She thought back to her fight with the young boy Nero and the Sparda boy Dante, after which she became his devil arm. The boy in front of her possessed similar abilities to both of them. Was it possible that they were related? If so, she would never lose to one of them again. Ignoring his clones, she roared, "Die boy!" as she leapt from the ground toward Naruto with her remaining strength. Naruto smirked as she approached, pouring chakra into Kyuubi to increase its sharpness, then twisting back slightly before hurling the chakrams, which blazed to life as they headed for her, killing her instantly as they passed through her as they flew back. Echidna's body fell to the ground in pieces, his clones dispelled, and the pieces dissolved, revealing a green light. "What the hell is that, Kyubi?" he asked him because, to be honest, he was curious and didn't feel like trying to recall how it worked. Echidna's soul is that if you use her as a weapon, you will probably get Mokuton. She will most likely also explain how it can stop yokai. "You mean she'll give an explanation? I just killed her, didn't I?" "Yes, but her soul turns into a weapon. She will tell you about the weapon, just like me, and if you're fortunate, she might also teach you about Mokuton. I suppose it's worth a try. Even if she doesn't, I'll still have an add to my arsenal." He walked toward the green light. He stood in front of it, stuck out his hand, and grabbed it. He was surrounded by a bright light. His appearance changed. On his body was a set of steel gauntlets, steel greaves, a steel mask, and steel back armor that looked like butterfly wings. On the shoulder portion of the gauntlets were buzzsaw-like blades with a red dot in the middle. All of the equipment had a set of symbols that constantly changed color from red to purple. The name of the new weapon hit his mind. "Gilgamesh is your name, huh? This is quite charming." "So," Echidna's voice started, "I suppose I've found myself working for Sparda once more. All right, I'll help you learn how to wield this weapon. Additionally, you can use Mokuton now that you have me. I'll teach you how to use it just like the young man in front of you did. We'll need to begin studying Mokuton later. Give me the lowdown on Gilgamesh right now." "All right, Gilgamesh is a special devil arm. Although it looks like steel, it is made of a devilish metal that is far stronger when powered up. The thrusters on the gauntlets and greaves help more than triple your strength. Additionally, there are buzz saws on the greaves and tiny extendable drills on the gauntlets. Additionally, the thrusters can help you accelerate. They are really helpful." "All right, then, tell me about any moves I might be able to execute." Echidna, too. "Yes. Thank you for joining the team." Echidna was taken aback. Dante had never thanked her once during her time in his service, but now here was the new Sparda, thanking her only for some information. She had assumed he would be a jerk, but she was mistaken. If she was stuck with him, she might as well do her best to help him. He asked her another question, which jolted her out of her reverie. "You are quite familiar with this forest. Echidna, is it possible for you to return me to the human area of the forest?" "Yes, take the direct route ahead. That ought to get you there." After deactivating Gilgamesh, Naruto said, "Right, thank you." He lifted his sleeve to reveal a tattoo of a flower on his right arm, put it down, and started to move forward toward the exit that Echidna had indicated. He had no idea what the future held, but he was certain that he could meet the challenges that lay ahead as he learned to control his new powers and abilities. Putting his thoughts aside, Naruto leapt up some of the lower tree branches and started to jump to a few a little higher. All he had to do now was locate his teammates. Hopefully, they hadn't gotten into too much trouble. Naruto kept jumping along the branches of the big trees in the seemingly endless forest. He had just defeated Echidna and left her demon-infested territory, so it seemed to be calm now. He kept listening to the world around him as he jumped, and the sounds of birds chirping were like a lovely melody, and the sound of rushing water nearby gave his lengthy journey a serene, tranquil effect. Bang! Kuso! Fuck! Ah! Yes, the sounds of the forest were quite pleasant. He wasn't sure if it was the devil in him acting up, but for some reason he felt a strange sense of euphoria from hearing the wonderful screams and loud booms emanating across the forest. Yes, it was probably the devil in him, but it didn't matter to him. He just kept jumping along happily, seemingly carefree. Although he didn't pretend to care, he did have one concern. Whether or not his team would survive. Sakura and Sasuke were his teammates and comrades, and he believed that over the course of the few months, they had somewhat bonded as a team, going on missions together, practicing teamwork, and even training together, albeit occasionally insufficiently. The group had even undergone some change. Sasuke was gradually opening up. He was still aware that he wasn't fully open, and he wasn't going to force him to be. He would let them in fully, if at all, when he was ready. He was a little kinder to Sakura, but he still flatly refused to go on a date with her. He also appeared to start viewing Naruto as a rival and developed a somewhat friendly rivalry with him, much to Naruto's covert delight. It was always good to have a friend, even though Sasuke wouldn't acknowledge that they were. While she hadn't been doing all the required training, Sakura had been gradually improving her ability to keep up with the two boys. She probably would have been in a slightly better position if she hadn't been so obsessed with that dumb diet. She had also shown a little more resolve, which helped her win Sasuke's affection and admiration, but you had to start somewhere, and she had been a little kinder to Naruto rather than completely ignoring him as she had been in the academy. In fact, now that he had used his new analytical abilities to think about it, he was not entirely sure why he liked Sakura. Was it because he felt she was similar to him in that she was initially unpopular? Perhaps he was seeking attention and praise? For the first time since he believed he loved Sakura, he felt his feelings gradually waning. He would never tell anyone, but what he really wanted was companionship, someone to love or look up to him, perhaps a surrogate brother or sister. But he wasn't sure anymore. Sakura had seemed like a good fit for companionship, but now he wasn't so sure. A growl came out of his head. His thoughts were interrupted by the words, "Gez Kit," his former tenant-turned weapon. "You're a sappy fool 1 minute, and a hardcore badass the next. Could a Sparda possibly be sad?" "Kyubi," Echidna reprimanded, "you idiot, the Sparta people are obviously sad. Why, I recall, young Nero was a serious young man lost in thought behind that smirk during our battle. I also heard from my fellow companions during my time as Dante's devil arm that Dante wept over his brother's death, which was thought to have occurred given the situation. Sparta can display a wide range of emotions." "Wow," Kyubi said icily, "I never imagined you would stand up for a Sparta. Since you joined the devil arm, I assumed you had a deep hatred for them." "I detest those three. Don't get me wrong, however, even after I attempted to murder him, Naruto-sama was kind to me and even courteous to me afterward. He has my utmost respect, and I would be pleased to help if he needed it for anything other than fighting." "Thank you, Echidna," Naruto thought, grinning. "You're really helpful. You won't regret putting your trust in me." Naruto's many new quirks included being jovial and cruel on the battlefield to get under his opponent's skin and being kind and gentle off the battlefield if he so desired. "Whatever," snorted the former Great Biju. "Stay focused here. Even though it might seem like nobody is around, you still need to be on your guard. Even though your ability to sense people has improved, you're still not entirely accurate. What on earth are you doing, you idiot? You must be." Naruto had jumped down from the branches to the forest flower near the river while Kyubi was ranting, and when Kyubi asked what he was doing, he had already started to remove his shirt. "Well," Naruto started, "I haven't had a bath since yesterday, and I'm filthy as hell at the very least. I want to remove some of this dirt." "Did I just say something that you didn't hear?" "So, what were you saying?" "Screw it, do as you please. Check to see if I'm interested, but when something bad happens, I'm just going to say the little phrase, 'I told you so,' over and over again." Kyubi then disconnected. Naruto shrugged and proceeded to undress, finally removing his boxers before stepping into the river. To his surprise, the temperature was just right, but then again, should he really be surprised? The name Hai no Kanai, the land of fire, wasn't just there for show. It wasn't literally on fire, but it was essentially summer all year long, and he couldn't recall a day that was cold. It never really got below 60 degrees at any point during the year, so he wasn't whining. Disregarding his thoughts, he made his way to a section of the river where the water level was slightly above his waist. He dipped a small rag he had kept in the pocket of his sweatpants into the water and started cleaning the dirt that had accumulated on his body, noting the 2 tattoos he now had on his chest and reminding himself of their identities. As he did so, he also evaluated his new look once more. He had lost his tan skin, which was now so pale that it was almost ashen in color, and his body was sculpted like a runner with a fully developed six-pack. Although he didn't look particularly strong, he could actually deliver an incredible hit, and his new body could take a lot of damage and heal almost instantly. Not a reason to get really reckless, but always a good idea to have just in case. He gazed at his face in the mirror like water. Like the rest of his body, he had lost a significant amount of his baby fat, making his face a little more chiseled and refined. His hair was still spiky, but it had turned silver, which he was glad didn't flatten because he wanted to stand apart from his ancestors in some way, and he could still see his whisker marks there, too. He felt as though he was losing his identity. He smiled the foxy smile he had been known for prior to his rebirth. It would take some getting used to, but he could learn to like it all the while. He failed to notice 3 intruders in his field of vision. Was this a good thing? Was it bad? Was the change for the better? He really didn't know. With intruders, Shinichi Ayane was frozen in place. Why? Well, what she was staring at now made her stare, and she even felt a little heat on her cheeks. She was staring at a cute silver-haired boy, or rather, a man. He was a little pale, but that was made up for by his sculpted chest and that big. She blushed more. Why was this guy standing there naked in the river? She began to think negative or positive thoughts, but she couldn't tell right now. She shook those thoughts out of her head. They were thrilled when their sensei nominated them for the exams. After 2 long years as genin, he finally believed they were ready, and they would finally be able to move on to more C and B ranked missions after saying goodbye to the constant D ranked ones. However, when they learned where it was, it only made them want to go farther. They had been taught that Konoha was full of tree-hugging bastards who constantly boasted about being the strongest village, so they wanted to prove in these tests that they weren't the strongest and knock them down a few pegs. Their sensei fully agreed, even saying that they should not show mercy to any Konoha shinobi. They had successfully completed the first test with relative ease. Upon being let loose into the forest, they immediately encountered and engaged in combat with a Kiri team, swiftly eliminating them and locating the necessary Earth Scroll for advancement. Since then, they have continued to defeat teams and gather their scrolls. Originally, they had come to the river to obtain water for their canteens, but they heard a stud whistling a lively tune and discovered that he was the culprit. Putting the stud's thought aside, she turned to her teammates Hayate and Renji Shina in order to gather their opinions. She often called them the Baka Kyodai, idiot brothers, because they thought more with their fists than their heads. Perhaps this was a redhead thing, but she wasn't sure. They were tanned and extremely muscular, so they probably shouldn't even be shinobi because that would just slow them down. Their faces were identical, curved with lots of baby fat on them. In fact, you couldn't tell the difference between them with the brown pants and brown muscle shirts. The only thing that stands out is that Hayate has a scar from his right eyebrow to his nose. So, Hayate went on, listening to their exchange while he had a crazy gleam in his eye. Why don't we also take this guy out of the competition? Renji gave his twin a sly smile. Of course, he said rather angrily, as an added bonus, he's a Konoha shinobi. Ayane glanced around and saw the exact same band that Konoha shinobi proudly wore. That was awful. Now they had to kill him. Why did all the adorable ones come from Konoha? Why not at least a village that Iwa was friendly with? However, he has a nice tool down there. He's also vulnerable, she finally added, blushing once more. He isn't wearing any clothing and probably won't get to his tools fast enough. Perhaps that's his preferred weapon. She blushed more intensely. If she was thinking such bizarre things, she really needed to get laid. Taking a kunai from the tanned pouch on his hip and bringing it into throwing range, the terrified twin grinned cynically and said, "Excellent point, Ayane. Let's get ready to. Come on out." They sighed. "I can feel your chakra." Their eyes widened. They were so quiet. How did he know they were there? It just had to be a sensor type, didn't it? Were they really that unlucky? Ayane glanced over and saw the twins beaming broadly. "Fine," Hayate said. Renji went on, "We always preferred." Together, Hayate and Renji said, the direct approach, nodded, and departed the bushes, leaving Ayane by herself in their hiding spot. The guy had an interesting piece on him, but at least he couldn't get at his equipment, so she sighed and slapped herself, realizing there was no use hiding now. She got up and followed the twins. With Naruto wanted to slap himself in the face for his foolishness because he was so preoccupied with his thoughts that he didn't realize they had ambushed him until he was ready to grab his clothes and leave. He watched as the bushes rustled, which only served to confirm that someone was there. He heard rustling in the bushes again, and a girl with an intriguing appearance emerged. His new friends were twins, exactly what he wanted to see, and they had red heads. At that, they were also too muscular, which had to limit their speed. By God, they even wore the same clothes. The only difference Naruto could see was the scar that ran up to one of the twins' eyes. She was a girl who was a few inches taller than him, most likely due to her age. Her black hair and deep purple eyes, along with her exquisitely framed face, made her stand out among all the women he had ever met. After he had finished examining her face, he noticed how she was dressed. Her short-sleeved purple shirt hugged her body tightly and revealed some of her impressive cleavage and flat-toned stomach to the world. Her village forehead protector, signifying that she was Iwa, was currently being worn as a belt. When Naruto turned back to her face, he noticed that it was red. The only explanation for her intense blushing was that he had just begun to leave the river when he saw them and beckoned them out. Really, it's not like he was nude or anything. She's blushing because of this. Why did this happen? He chastised himself in his mind. Because the kitsune that had been trapped in his stomach started. Kami just loves fucking with you. He paused for a moment before saying, "By the way, numbnuts, I'd like to take this opportunity to say, I told you so." Echidna was crying as he watched a chibi Kyuubi dance inside his mindscape, which is home to all of his weapon spirits. He yelled, "I told you so." He paused his conversation and turned back to face the group in front of him, saying, "Can it you smartass kitsune?" He grinned and looked at the blushing girl once more, saying, "So beautiful. See something you like? 3-on-1. I could learn to like those odds." Her face turned as red as a cherry. He had learned a lot from Dante, but before he could say anything more, one of the large, red-headed teenagers interrupted. "You foolish tree-hugging bastard, shut up." He swiftly withdrew a kunai and said, "Give up and let us make your death as painless as possible." Tisk, don't you guys know how to be proper villains? Naruto sighed. "You're not supposed to get to that straight away," he said, lifting his hand and waving his index finger condescendingly as the three Iwa genin blinked at him. "I'm dealing with amateurs here. And after at least 2 minutes of clever banter, you say, give up and well make your death as painless as possible." The three people in front of him started to perspire. "Well, I suppose I can teach you a few lessons now that you've gone and ruined the atmosphere." From the genin's perspective, Naruto appeared to have vanished. Renji and Hayate assumed taijutsu stances. extending their arms on either side with tiny metal claws protruding from the tips of their gloves, while Ayane took out a kunai and crouched down so that the three of them would be prepared to strike whenever their opponent was ready to reveal himself. Dust rose around the body of the red-headed Iwa shinobi, and then the leaves on the floor rustled, and then Renji was knocked off his feet with a punch to the gut and hit into the air. A blur appeared above him, and it was Naruto, with a grin on his face, and his leg was lifted high into the air. Renji's eyes widened as he recognized Naruto, and the naked, sliver-haired boy quickly brought down his heel and slammed it hard into Renji's stomach, sending the boy flying downward and sending him into the ground, hard, leaving spider web cracks. As Renji's two teammates stood there in disbelief, Naruto, still grinning, landed on the ground with grace. As the dust cleared, they saw a frightening sight. Renji's head was bleeding out from under his headband, his breathing was ragged, and he looked worse for the wear. Overall, his right arm was limp, indicating that it was probably sprained. "So," Naruto started, "you were able to stay awake somehow." Naruto stood there nonchalantly, not even trying to hide his package or any other part of his body. "Niece, you must be pretty strong." If Ayane wasn't scarred right now, she would have blushed, but fear had crept over her features instead. This guy's a monster. It simply hasn't been done to be able to do that to Renji. He and Hayate can withstand some of Sensei's hardest blows in sparring and only sustain minor wounds. They had trained their bodies to just be like that, yet he did what Sensei couldn't with one hit. It was true, although Renji and Hayate were raised in a non-clan household, their father was a formidable A-ranked shinobi who had earned the nickname Raku no Otoko, Man of Rock, during the previous war because it was rumored that shinobi could drop boulders on top of him and he would walk away unharmed. He eventually hoped to use their training skills to start a clan. The brothers enthusiastically embraced their father's idea and carried his training as far as they could. Sensei had to rely on experience and tactics to defeat them. This man, however, did what genuinely alarmed her. Renji, barely able to stand, mustered the courage to speak. "What are you?" His glare had no effect on Naruto, who had assumed a contemplative stance, but he was genuinely curious about what he and his team were dealing with, whether it was a Kekkei Genkai or something. The three Iwa genin perspired as they said, "Well, to be honest, I haven't thought about it too much. Depending on your perspective, you could describe it as a Kekkei Genkai, a curse, or perhaps a disguised gift. However, I suppose I would call it Akuma Soru, Devil Soul, if I had to." "And what does it do?" asked Ayane. If this guy was as arrogant as she was beginning to think, they might be able to decipher a weakness that they could use against him. It was honestly a good thought. Many great shinobi have boasted how their abilities work and that arrogance usually helped lead to their downfall, so maybe this guy would be like that. "You really want to know?" Naruto asked, leaning forward. He disappeared from their sight again. The three tensed and felt their heartbeats rise out of their chests. Ayane felt a something near her ear. "It's a sec. Ret." As Hayate hurried in with unexpected speed for his size, she leapt forward to get away before he could seize her. Bear's triumph. Kuma no Toreanfu. Hayate slammed his shoulder into Naruto's stomach, forcing him off his feet and to go flying back into the forest. He turned and shouted back to her, "Hurry and heal Renji." Hayate turned back and waited for their opponent to exit the forest, but she nodded slightly and ran to assist Renji, saying, "If we're going to beat him, we're going to need Renji to help me with taijutsu combos." With Naruto? Well, I didn't anticipate that, Naruto thought as he lowered his feet to avoid colliding with a tree with the intention of kicking their asses. He got to his feet and started to return to the clearing. In his mind, the great former demon lord yelled, "You idiot," asking him what he thought he was doing. "I suppose I became overconfident, didn't I?" "You did, damn it." "But I was trying to rile them up." Echidna started off by saying, "We understand Naruto-sama, but Dante had two advantages as well. One was that he was aware of his strengths and weaknesses. The second is that he never allowed his arrogance to overcome him. Remember when you first fought me a few hours ago? There's a difference between just using it to make your opponents make mistakes and actually believing it," she said, pausing to give it some thought. "You were only making mistakes and using it to aggravate me. It was successful. You genuinely thought you were unbeatable against them here." Kyuubi made the decision to take it home, saying, "Look, kid, we're all in this together indeed. You possess the power, you still lack true mastery, though you need to exercise greater caution. I'm not advocating for you to stop being arrogant in combat, but do your best to maintain composure." Naruto paused and pondered for a moment. They were correct. He could continue to be arrogant on the inside while keeping his analytical mind active on the outside. Instead of thinking he was invincible, this became a weakness for many shinobi, and he had to avoid it. Even with this new power, he was glad they supported him. "Thanks guys." "You're welcome, Naruto-sama," Echidna exclaimed in response to the compliment. "Whatever kid," Kyuubi said sternly, as though to hide something, and Naruto simply grinned before hearing cries from the clearing up ahead. Right, the battle, he thought as he raised his head until he could see his opponent Renji appeared nearly identical to when they had first met in the clearing, save for the dried blood all over his body. His twin grinned, presumably thinking he had been weakened by his ability to toss Naruto so far. Ayane's expression was serious. They were all in stances, prepared for battle now that they believed they understood the full extent of his abilities. So, Hayate said in an almost haughty tone, "You can back. I genuinely believe that you might have died or at the very least had to flee to protect yourself." Naruto decided to hide his frown by smirking back, saying, "Well, I know my sexy ass could work the birthday suit look, but there's an updraft in this forest so I would at least prefer some pants on." This guy was being overconfident. True. A hit like the one he delivered to an unsuspecting opponent could cause injury if there was enough force behind it, but his didn't. "You didn't even give me the opportunity to get boxers before we started, really. I'm curious as to how you managed to fight like that." Renji, who appeared to have recovered some of his strength, asked. Naruto turned to face the female in the group and grinned, saying, "Well, when I have a beautiful audience such as herself, you feel the need to show off a bit." The woman blushed at the look and turned her head. Her teammates noticed and moaned. It was understandable why her reaction time had been so slow earlier. She was agitated. Also, Naruto continued, holding his finger up in the air and striking a scholarly pose. "A true shinobi must be able to adapt to any form of combat," he said, wiggling his eyebrows. The silver-headed boy's attempt at humor irritated the three, who then became serious once more. "So," Hayate smirked, "what's name?" "We should write," the other brother added, adopting a posture akin to the one Hayate had previously adopted. "A stone on your head," the two brothers concluded in a menacing manner, causing Naruto to perspire and turn to face their teammate. "Do they consistently complete one another's sentences?" He glanced at the three of them and smiled confidently. "Isn't it courteous to give your own names first?" She nodded in agreement, a drop of sweat forming on the back of her head as well. The brothers nodded to each other and glanced at Ayane, who appeared to know what they wanted. She sighed, pulled out a paper bomb tag, and threw it in front of them. When it exploded, smoke covered the front of them, and two shadows appeared behind the smoke, suddenly taking the shape of two bears. "We are..." Naruto heard echo around the clearing as the smoke cleared, revealing them in absurd positions as though attempting to resemble bears. "The Iwa no Suinbizu, twin bears of Iwa. Hayate and Renji, bask in our glory." "Shinichi Ayane," she said simply, nodding in agreement as Naruto looked at them with an expression akin to asking, "Really?" before turning to face their teammate with the same expression. With a foxy smile that made her blush, Naruto said, "Ayane, that's such a beautiful name. Well, since you told me your names, I'll give mine. Naruto, Sparda Naruto, future Hokage." "Well, we can kill you now that we have your name," Hayate said, while his twin sprinted through hand seals. Doden. Rakatoriru, Earth Release. Rock Trail. Naruto quickly leapt to the side to avoid the wave of rocks that Renji sent toward the silver-haired teen after slamming his hands into the ground. He watched as Hayate rushed toward him, his clawed glove extended back, ready to strike. Kuma no Sume. Bear Claw. He grabbed his opponent's arm and threw him over his shoulder, only to have to dodge shuriken thrown by the team's Kunoichi. Hayate's clawed hand attempted to strike Naruto with his knife-like claws as soon as he was close, moving faster than the average Chunin-level shinobi. After landing on the ground, Naruto felt a kick to his ribs, pushing him back and only allowing him to lean back to avoid a swipe from Renji's clawed hand. Renji flew over Naruto, allowing him to grab his arm and throw him with great strength toward his brother, who was approaching from behind. The two redheads collided with such force that they were knocked to the ground. "Well, to be honest, I was expecting better from you too," Naruto said, grinning as he stood up straight. "Perhaps we should call you Iwa no Suinkabusu, the twin cubs of Iwa, instead." He was suddenly hit by a smoke bomb, which covered his vision and caused him to cough a little before the smoke cleared. Come on, what was a smoke bomb supposed to do? He was a little taken aback when the smoke cleared and the area became clear. Had they run? No, those two idiots would never have run, even if their female teammate had suggested it. From what he could tell, they were too stubborn. Genjutsu, illusionary techniques, was the only conclusion that remained, so he wasted no time in sending a wave of chakra from his body. When he returned to the battlefield, the twin brothers were running at him from the left and right, their shoulders extended in a charge, just as Hayate had done to him before. Suinbia no Torianfu, twin bears triumph. As both opponents roared at him, getting ready to hit him in the ribs with their shoulders, he just leapt over them and let them crash into each other, sending the brothers hurtling apart with the force of their blow. Naruto crossed his fingers into one of his favorite techniques while they were in the air. Shadow Clone Technique, or Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A dozen Narutos appeared in the air. One clone grabbed Renji and another grabbed Hayate and threw them up higher into the air. Each got kicked by two Narutos higher and then punched with great force in the ribs by two other Naruto. Then one Naruto grabbed each and threw the twins towards one another, smashing them into each other. The real Naruto, who was above them, then brought a chakra-enhanced kick down on the jumbled-up brothers. Naruto Renden. Akuma no Risu. Naruto Combo. Devil's Wrath. Their bodies were now stuck in the ground after the brothers were hurled into the ground at a high speed, crashing into the ground with such force that it formed spider web-like cracks. "Well, that should keep you two out for a while," Naruto said as he gracefully landed on the ground. Suddenly, a tree grew behind him and began to wrap around him, drawing him toward it until the tree's branches finally stopped moving. Ayane appeared in the upper part of the tree with a kunai slowly descending toward him, and he smiled at her. "Well, Ayane-chan, I didn't know you were into this kinda stuff," he said. "Okay. Well, she's not getting flustered anymore. Time for plan B." "Okay. Well, she's not getting flustered anymore. Time for plan B. Kinky." He whispered the last part in a husky voice as she drew closer, and he could see a hint of pink on her cheeks, but she went on to end him. What was plan B? The solution to any of his genjutsu problems. Release a shitload of chakra and hope it overloads the illusion. By doing so, the technique he was using vanished. She jumped back and threw two kunai with explosive tags attached. As if realizing he was no longer in the illusion, deciding he had had enough, he grabbed both kunai out of the air and threw them close to her. Her eyes widened in shock, and the tags exploded before she could react, pushing her to the ground and landing on both feet in a crouching position. Ninpo. Doku Kiri. Ninja Art. Poison Mist, she said, taking a deep breath and blowing out a purple fog towards the whiskered shinobi, who knew he would be immune to the poison gas but decided it would be best if people knew less about his new abilities, so he avoided the attack. She ran towards him as she flashed through hand seals, jumped into the air, and finished the last seal, releasing the jutsu. When she landed, she ran toward her opponent with all of her strength, a little disheartened that he had evaded her attack so easily. She flipped through hand seals, and her hands started to glow blue, indicating an active technique. Chakra no Mesu, Chakra Scalpel. He dodged to the right as she ran at him, trying to cut his tendons with a slash toward his leg, and then, nearly stumbling in the run, she tried to hit one of his arms to stop movement so he couldn't use that clone ability again, but he moved his arm at the last second, and each time she nearly hit him with the scalpel, it missed. "You know," he said, "you're pretty talented." After Naruto kicked her in the side and made her move aside, she stopped, panting, while he just stood there casually. "Your skills in genjutsu and Iryo ninjutsu, medical ninja techniques, are impressive. You're not so bad yourself for a supposed rookie genin," she said with a slight smirk. "I've only seen two idiots with that level of strength, and you're so damn fast. Remember how hot I am too." She flushed as he struck a pose and gave her a suggestive eyebrow wag. When she saw something moving behind Naruto, she smiled at him and said, "Well, looks like it's over now. Trust me," she thought to herself, "if you weren't the enemy we'd probably be doing other stuff right now." Even though Naruto didn't think a girl like her could have such a cunning smile, he didn't like it. But before he could say anything, he heard something hit the floor. Kachiyose no Jutsu. Summoning technique. Suddenly, Naruto had to avoid an enormous claw that dug into the ground where he was standing. A 15-foot-tall bear with light brown fur stood on its hind legs, clad in shiny silver armor that covered his stomach and all four legs, and a silver helmet atop his head. The bear roared menacingly at the silver-haired teen. He saw that Hayate and Renji, who had called forth the bear, were covered in various wounds and covered in blood. They appeared to be near death, but their teammate was to his left, and although she no longer had that malevolent smile, she appeared happy that the roles had reversed. "You should have just let us kill you in the beginning, you tree-hugging bastard," Hayate sneered. "However, you made us go all out," Renji brashly remarked. "Taste the power of the Kuma clan's Montanu, Oka, Mountain Walker," they exclaimed collectively. The enormous bear roared once more before all four of its paws struck the ground and began to run quickly toward Naruto, who stood there seemingly unconcerned. When the bear was within striking distance, Naruto raised his right arm. Sparda's arm, or Sparda no Amu. As the bear's eyes widened in what appeared to be recognition, Naruto reared his arm back and thrust it forward, and the energy shot the arm out like a grapple and grabbed a hold on the bear's head. He pulled back, bringing the bear back toward him, and when it was close enough, he let go of its head, grabbed it again, and brought it down with amazing force. strong enough to cancel the summoning technique and send it home. His arm sifted from its once human flesh-covered arm into that of a black hard skinned and red-veined arm. His arm literally changed into that demonic-looking thing, and the onlookers stared at him with fear in their eyes. At this point, they all had the same thought. Is he a Jinchuriki? In contrast to Konohagakure no Sato, the majority of genin in other shinobi villages were taught about Jinchuriki in their shinobi academies. If they were to join the force, they needed to know about them in case they were encountered on a mission or during an invasion. For example, their Jinchuriki, Han and Roshi, were in self-imposed exile to try and learn to control their abilities to the best of their capabilities. They hadn't been seen in the village in years. Iwa shinobi treated their Jinchuriki with impassive thinking. They really didn't think they were all that useful unless it was during wartime, but even then, they were taught to just give them an order and they'll do it if you have a high enough position. Let go. Naruto, blurred from their sight, appeared next to Hayate, and used the demonic arm to pick him up by the head. Before any of them could finish thinking about it, he yelled as he attempted to pry Naruto's arm away, but Naruto simply slammed his face into the ground, releasing his grip and turning to face Renji, who had leapt back to stand close to Ayane. You know, Naruto remarked, approaching them, perhaps you ought to have stayed down. Using his energy grapple, he threw his right arm forward in an attempt to catch Renji, who leapt to escape. Naruto grabbed Renji's foot as he was in the air and swung him in a circle before hurling him into a tree. As he approached Ayane, Naruto backed her up against the closest tree and stood directly in front of her, creating a clone and sending it to make sure the second red-haired idiot was unconscious. Do you give up? He asked her. She shook her head in confirmation. He smiled at her. Cool. Instead of telling him, she took a sealing scroll from her belt and handed it to him. Now, tell me where your scroll is. He looked at her questioningly and said, that has all of our scrolls in it. We had gone around gathering scrolls to remove other teams from the challenge. It contains 3 heaven and earth scrolls. Whistling, Naruto said, wow, it's only day 2, and you guys have already eliminated so many? After giving her a long look, Naruto turned and started to return to the rock where he had laid out his clothes. Where are you heading? Did he not intend to murder her? I've been fighting butt naked this entire time, he said, giving her a deadpan look in return. And don't worry, your friends aren't dead. The first thing I'm doing before anything else is putting my damn clothes on, he said, continuing to move toward the clothing. At this point, Ayane was too exhausted to argue with him, blush, or ask questions. Her surroundings were fading as she fell into a sound sleep. With Naruto, after completing his clothing, the young silver-haired shinobi headed back towards the wooded area at the edge of the clearing. Well done, kid, Kyuubi mockingly exclaimed as Naruto sprang into a run and leapt for the trees. It was the best idea ever to waste this much time just to take a bath. Fuck off, fuzz butt, he said, ignoring the demon kitsune's background complaints about stupid Gaki. Look, it just happened alright, he said. In addition, notice what I learned from it. 3 of each scroll and a life lesson. In my opinion, that is a fairly fair trade. Yes, but it's possible that we just killed Pinky and the Emo Avenger. Echidna said, that's enough, Kyuubi, don't worry Naruto-sama like that. Naruto was deep in contemplation as Echidna and Kyuubi engaged in a verbal altercation. Kyuubi was correct. What if he had killed them for his actions? Had they even made it through the altercation with that insane snake lady without the purple hair? No, of course they would survive. That woman might have been strong, but Sasuke Teme was resourceful. The prick was too damn stubborn to die without exacting his revenge. His pride as a Uchiha would not allow him to die. And he had to be strong because he was Naruto's rival. He decided to put an end to the mental battle between his 2 weapons by shaking his head. Enough. The 2 stopped shouting at each other. Look, Q was right, Echidna. I was too brash. I should have listened to him, but I didn't, and I wasted precious time needed to find my team. But none of that matters now. We have the scrolls and we're still in this to win it. I'm going to need both of you to help me, so please, let's just calm down and focus. He had managed to stun the 2 demons to silence finally, after a few minutes of silence while he had been running. Echidna broke the silence. Naruto-sama, I may have a way for you to find your friends. Naruto stopped jumping, waited for an explanation. As a user of Mokuton, you are able to connect to the forest around you through their chakra networks. You'll be able to sense anything in this forest or any forest for that matter. However, it takes some skill with the element to do it. Skill which I don't have yet, he replied, wondering why she would even mention this now if it took skill in the element to do it. I know, however, if you allow me temporary control of your body, I can use this ability to help find them. She waited for his response. Do it, he stated with finality. She was mildly surprised. He had expected her to ask if she was going to permanently take over his body or something like that. Well, what's wrong? Are you going to do it? Of course, But I had expected Master to ask if I would permanently take over his body or something like that. Echidna, he thought gently with a smile, I trust you, that's why I didn't ask. She was shocked he trusted her, he believed in her to the point where he would let her take over his body like this without question. At first she was stunned, but then it slowly turned into what felt like happiness that he trusted her like that. She would not betray that trust. Naruto closed his eyes and allowed her to take temporary control. When his eyes opened, they were green. The echidna controlled Naruto, then walked over to the tree he was presently on and placed his hands on the tree's trunk. His eyes closed. Echidna felt the chakra of the world around them. Searching for Naruto's friend's specific signatures, she had a lot of signatures to search through. It took a minute, but she located the signature. She felt several signatures in the area near Naruto's team. They were mostly unfriendly. Acting quickly, she let Naruto have control again. Naruto-sama, we must hurry. Your friends are in danger. Naruto let out a startled gasp. Which way? He growled. No one would harm his precious people. They're 3 miles east of here, in a clearing below the trees. Naruto needed no more info as he hightailed it in that direction. Any info I should know? Sasuke's signature is out cold and Sakura seems to be fighting but running low on chakra. The 3 attackers have at least Chunin level chakra also. There was one unknown heading toward the clearing. I couldn't discern the unknown as friend or foe however. Right. Naruto doubled the pace, blurring from branch to branch with inhuman speed. Hang on Sakura, just hold them a bit longer, I'm coming. With Sakura, Haruno Sakura was scared for the second time since she entered this forsaken forest after the event with Orochimaru and losing Naruto. In an attempt to protect Sasuke, took him to a hollowed-out tree and tended to him. Waiting for him to wake up, she tended to him and his growing fever. She also had set up traps to protect them. However, her plans fell apart when they came. A team of genin from Odogakure no Sato came and made an attempt to kill Sasuke. She and Sasuke had only been saved by Rock Lee, who had come to their rescue. However, he too had fallen after using his strongest technique. They were then saved by Team 10, whose plans had backfired when they realized that the Auto Nin only cared for results, and while the rest of Lee's team had shown up to help out Lee, their real problem came when Sasuke had woken up. He was covered in the black markings of Orochimaru's seal, which had given him unbelievable power. He used said power to take down the Auto Genin, Zaku. By breaking his arms, he had then turned his sights only member of the attack force who was awake. Dosu. He was stalking towards Dosu menacingly, ready to take down the Nin. When he suddenly stopped, he looked towards the rustling trees. Everyone's sight fell on that area. A blur came out and landed on the ground. The women of the group, Sakura included, blushed despite the situation. He stood a bit taller than Sasuke. His skin was a bit pale, his hair was silver and his face was mostly devoid of baby fat. He was dressed in tattered orange pants that looked a little too short for him and a blue muscle shirt which showed off a bit of a six-pack. On his arm was a forehead protector with the insignia of a leaf. On his face was a grin like no other. Whoa Sasuke, like what you've done with the place, he joked in a cool tone of voice that sent shivers down the spines of the women present. But, he faked a tear, you threw a party and didn't invite me, your best buddy. How cruel, you are, man. Do I know you? Sasuke asked with a glare, the black markings around him making it look more menacing. Everyone just sat back in anticipation, waiting for the silver-haired teen's reply, wondering what he would do. Kami, damn it. Sasuke Teme. I leave you and Sakura-chan alone for a day and a half and you forget all about me. You really are a bastard. He threw a fake tantrum, causing everybody but Sasuke to sweat drop. Sasuke, however, was wide-eyed. He looked at the boy's cheeks. He had 3 whisker marks on each side. With hesitation, as the curse seal began to fade, he asked, Naruto? A bird could drop dead from the sky and nobody would notice right now. This guy was Naruto? Uzumaki Naruto, Konoha's knucklehead shinobi? There was just no way. The whiskered teen just grinned. You do remember me? He again began to fake cry. I'm touched. He bowed. Yes, it is I, the mighty Naruto. He posed. Sasuke and the others just shook their heads. Sakura and he had watched Naruto fall during the battle with Orochimaru. They were so high, he shouldn't have even been able to survive. There was only one way to know. What is the Nin machine? Naruto stood there for a moment, thinking. He then began to hit himself in the head over and over, mumbling, remember, over and over again. Well, he sure acted like Naruto would. Finally, after a minute, he replied. A large amount of loud enemies is the friend of shinobi. Hide and remain silent. A shinobi must understand the proper time, when the enemy is tired and ill-prepared. Sasuke was about to respond correct, but remembered Orochimaru knew the password as well, so he decided another test. What's your favorite food? Ramen, he replied quickly, proving he didn't even think about that one. What's your favorite color? My favorite color is orange. No hesitation or thought in his reply. Sasuke decided to ask one final question to determine if he Naruto or not. Kakashi-sensei told us what when he accepted us as a team. Which one are you looking for? A ninja must see underneath the underneath, or are you looking for those who break the rules and codes of the ninja world are trash, but those who don't take care of their comrades are lower than trash? Surprised, Sasuke answered them all right. This was unquestionably Naruto, and he was actually a little happy right now. He had assumed that Naruto had fallen to his death because he had missed, but now their foolish teammate was standing in front of them. He looked different, but he was glad Naruto was still alive, as much as he hated to admit it. Sakura, on the other hand, was on the verge of tears. He was alive and well, and he appeared more attractive now, though not as much as Sasuke. All that mattered to her was that their team was back together, but she suddenly remembered something. She looked around the clearing with her eyes, but Dosu and his team were nowhere to be seen. The two boys looked around the clearing and saw that their enemies had indeed fled. Sasuke-kun, Naruto, I think that bandaged guy just ran away. Come on, man. Naruto stomped his foot into the ground. I never had an opportunity to kick his ass. With the exception of Neji and Tenten, who were rousing Lee, all of the genin who were awake moved in the direction of Naruto and Sasuke. After giving Naruto a quick glance, Shikamaru asked the question that was on everyone's minds. What happened, you troublesome blonde? Naruto's perspiration stopped. The former blonde deadpanned. My hair is sliver Shika, pointing to his silvery hair to emphasize his point. Shikamaru said, Mendoku's, how troublesome, and went on, that's what I'm talking about. How did you get that look? Most people were taken aback when he said, well, I activated my Kekkei Genkai from my near-death experience. Naruto didn't even have a clan. Naruto, Ino said sharply, quit making jokes. Naruto smiled and leaned forward until he was just an inch from her face, saying, you don't have a clan. Wrong Ino-chan, he said in the smooth voice she had started to like. Your statement is incorrect in two ways. One, being a Kekkei Genkai doesn't necessarily require belonging to a clan. You don't have to be a member of a clan to have one. It could be a brand new one or one you acquired abnormally too. What if I do have a clan, but the majority of them simply vanished or something? She flushed as he leaned closer until he could feel his nose against hers, and then he smiled and pulled away, saying, I think I just proved your statement wrong. The fact that Naruto flirted with Ino of all people shocked those around him, but they were even more shocked when he did it while refuting her argument, so they chose to forget it ever happened. At that point, Shoji made the decision to pose a query. So, what does it do then? Everyone, including Team Guy, who had just joined and had been listening to the conversation, and Ino, who had just woken up from her trance, leaned in to hear Naruto whisper, you really want to know? Well, its abilities are a secret. Many shook their heads in agreement. They decided to pick up the subject at a later time because they were having no success with the former blonde. Sasuke and Sakura stood beside him while the other teams gathered their belongings and got ready to depart. They noticed Lee and his group about to depart when Naruto called out to them. Yo, bushy brows, white eyes, buns, I've got something for you. The nicknames given to the members of Team Guy caused everyone to perspire. Naruto took out a storage scroll and placed it on the ground. He unrolled it, put his hands on the central seal, and pushed in his chakra, revealing 3 black and 3 white scrolls that were precisely matched in color. When the whiskered teen asked, so, which one you need? All of the genin, including Team Guy, looked at him in disbelief, wondering where he got all of these scrolls. There must have been a catch because he was going to give it to them for free. What's the catch? He had turned into a wild card at this point, and it was possible that he had placed explosive tags or other traps on them, so Tenten asked cautiously. Look, Lee-san here protected my team, Naruto said with a smile. Despite the possibility of death, he continued to assist them. I would like to thank him for that by giving him the scroll you require. He sighed and said, look, have White Eyes use his Buku thingy to look for traps. Plus, it would be fun to fight at least one of you next round. He could still see the doubt in their eyes. However, I promise you won't find anything. Before nodding, Neji's teammate gave him a quick glance. Byakugan, White Eye. Tenten deactivated his eyes and nodded to his teammates after using the eye to search through all of the scrolls and find no traps. Tenten then approached Naruto's seat and picked up an earth scroll. She said, thank you, and started to leave. He shouted to her, anytime beautiful, and heard her squeak before she and her group disappeared into the trees. Well, you guys helped too, he said, turning to face Team 10. Do you want one? No, you guys probably have your own already, don't you? He smiled. He heard Ino say a brief, thank you, before grabbing a heaven's scroll from the collection and running off with it, her team trailing behind. He was about to seal them up. Hold on to those, okay? He said, chuckling before turning to face his own team and tossing 2 of the scrolls to Sakura, who caught them. After she nodded, he turned to face Sasuke and tossed the scrolls into the air, saying, "If you would be so kind as to burn those scrolls, Sasuke." Sasuke grinned and flashed through hand seals, releasing a huge flaming ball that struck the scrolls and fell to the ground in ash fragments. "Now, what do you say we head for the tower?" For emphasis, he held his stomach. Sakura agreed, but Naruto was taken aback when Sasuke agreed with him and didn't challenge his idea, a first for Naruto. The 3 nodded to one another before heading into the trees after Sakura put a soldier pill she had in her bag in her mouth to give herself extra energy for the journey. 5 hours later, tower at the center, in front of the inscription on the tower wall, Team 7 stood. They had spent a lot of time traveling here and had engaged in small talk along the way. They had attempted to ask Naruto about the change, but he would always joke or change the subject entirely, so they finally gave up. They waited for another minute, but nothing happened after Sakura took out the scrolls and set them on the ground. "Are these things busted?" Naruto asked as he kicked them, and as if his kick were magic, they opened up, revealing a cloud of smoke that eventually revealed Iruka, the former sensei of Genin's graduating class, a tanned man with a big scar over his nose and a Chunin flak jacket and standard Konoha shinobi clothing. Iruka glanced around and said, "Ah, I expected you guys a bit later than this. Sasuke, Sakura, where's Naruto?" The 2 then gestured toward the teenager with the silver hair. "Hey sensei, how are things going?" Iruka appeared shocked. "Is that you?" Naruto snarled. "Oh my god, I'm sick of telling people this. I'm Naruto. Yes, I'm starving here, so can we please move this along quickly, sensei? Why am I so hungry anyway?" For the first time since he had told them to stop talking, Kyuubi said, "Because, as a half-devil, you burn more energy and such. You used to eat 10 bowls of ramen, but now you'll probably eat 20, so you need to eat more," he said with a laugh. "Your food expenses will be enormous." Well, there's always a trade-off. He returned to reality and listened to his sensei's lecture on the inscription before the speech came to an end. "Apparently mine is having to eat more." Iruka congratulated him, saying, "You passed the second test. I'll give you a room in the tower and then you can go to the dining hall to get something to eat." Naruto smiled as the team slowly followed him out. "I have a strong sense that this will be an incredible celebration." Naruto sat on the bed in the room his team was given while they were in the tower. It was not a large room, but it was just big enough to accommodate 3 people, with a small table in the center of the room and cots for each of them to sleep on. Other than that, the room was rather empty. Iruka gave the team a tour of the facilities after they left the room with the inscription of the Sandaime Hokage's beliefs. He led them first to the mess hall, where they could get something to satisfy their hunger, and while they were there, they noticed that the Suna team had just finished a meal as they passed to leave. Gaara glared at Naruto and Sasuke, while Naruto flirted with his sister Temari, who blushed from his compliments. They were then given a tour of the other facilities, which included private training areas and facilities for individuals or teams to practice on, as well as a shinobi supply shop on the same floor where, if you had cash on you, you could buy equipment and parts as special orders from a village dealer or restock supplies. He would use that one later. When Iruka finally showed them to their room, he explained that it was co-ed and that they had to sleep in the same room as their team. They also had a 10 o'clock curfew that required them to be in their rooms or else they would be disqualified before he left. He explained that the bathroom and showers were down the hall. Sakura blushed when he told her that they were different genders, which made Sakura very happy. Sakura and Sasuke went straight to bed when Iruka left them for the evening, not even exchanging words with each other. He felt that they had every right to do so, though, because it had been a difficult 2 days, during which they had fought a fucking Sennin and nearly died twice. It's true that they didn't battle a demon or a group of Chunin-level genin from Iwa, but they still had to be exhausted. Naruto, on the other hand, was unable to sleep because he had a lot on his mind. He had only unlocked his 2 Kekkei Genkai blood limit today, and he was already using one of them to the fullest extent possible. He had no idea what the other one did, so he filed it away to talk to Kyuubi about it later. He also thought about that mark Sasuke had on his neck, and when Naruto inquired about it, he was told that Orochimaru had given it to him after Naruto had fallen below, but nothing else was mentioned, which greatly alarmed him. He and his 2 companions felt a surge of yokai, demonic energy, in the air as they approached the field where he had discovered the other genin. Upon arriving and witnessing Sasuke's appearance, he deduced that it was being released by Sasuke. This gave rise to a new thought in his mind. Where had Orochimaru gotten it from? He wasn't a demon, and Kyuubi hadn't even felt any yokai leaking out before he was sealed away. The only way he could have obtained it by contracting with a demon. A knock on the door, however, distracted Naruto from his thoughts. He sighed, got up, and went to the door. When he opened it, He was shocked to see one of Hokage Oji-san's Anbu standing in front of him. He had messy brown hair, was dressed in standard Anbu attire, and had a mask with green and red markings that resembled a cat's face. Naruto Uzumaki? Naruto smiled at him as he asked in a monotone. That's me, Naruto said nonchalantly. Hokage-sama asks that you come right away. He says you need to talk to him immediately. With a nod of approval, Naruto went outside, followed the Anbu down the hall, and quietly closed the door to avoid waking his team. So, he said, what's it like to be an Anbu? Quiet. Yes, I did think so. How do the missions look? Quiet. You know, to converse, at least two people must be willing to exchange words. Quiet. This was how it went the rest of the way to the temporary office of the Hokage. Alongside the Hokage, in the chair he had been given for his makeshift office inside the tower, Sarutobi Hiruzen reclined and smoked on a pipe. Among the many things he learned today was that Orochimaru, his former pupil, had returned and was now in the forest. He nearly suffered a heart attack upon learning that his errant pupil had returned. He started wondering right away what he wanted, and based on the newly discovered information, he assumed it was Uchida Sasuke. Orochimaru had desired two things since he was a young boy. Immortality was one, the other was familiarity with every jutsu style in the world. For these purposes, a Uchiha would be ideal. His only other choice was Sasuke, since Itachi was probably out of reach due to his off-grid status. With this knowledge, they would need to watch Sasuke closely going forward. The information about Naruto's new look was another recent development. Hiruzen had known Naruto since the boy's birth that fateful night, so he was like family to him. For the boy, he would stop at nothing. He had a strong will and a good heart. He was the perfect example of the will of fire that he had been taught by his senseis. However, Iruka revealed some fascinating facts about Naruto to the former shinobi no Kami, god of shinobi. During his report about the arrival of Team 7 today, he was nearly unrecognizable due to the drastic changes in his appearance. Furthermore, it appeared that his personality had also evolved for Kami's sake. He was now flirting with women. The boy who didn't care about women was now making advances, and that was allegedly just one of his numerous new personality quirks. Were his actions influenced by the Kyuubi? Is the seal cracking? He needed answers to all of these questions, which is why Jiraiya, one of his former students, was standing beside him. A tall man wearing a kabuki shirt and dark green kabuki pants was his former pupil. There was also a fishnet shirt underneath it. He had on a red sage coat with yellow circles in the front that matched his shirt. He had a noticeable wart on his nose and long, spiky gray hair. A big scroll rested on his back, and a forehead protector bearing the kanji word for oil was placed on his forehead. Sensei, the man said solemnly, do you know anything about Minato's child's condition? Jiraiya, the older man said calmly, you wouldn't be here now if I had any idea. Come on, Sensei, I really don't see a problem here from what you told me. He's really just flirting with women. Is that really such a bad thing? With a disappointed expression, the older gentleman turned to face his pupil. He had never told Jiraiya to keep away from him, and he said, if you had been there for him like I had encouraged you to be, you would know by now that this is unlike him. In order for him to understand what family was like, he had at least wanted to see the young man occasionally. However, Jiraiya only ever made one visit. He gave Naruto his Gama-chan wallet, but Naruto was too young to recall. It was now his student's turn to face him directly. You know why I couldn't be here? I have a spy network to maintain, one that has stopped many threats to this village and saved thousands from dying. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, no matter how much I would prefer they didn't. Hiruzen was about to respond when there was a knock on the door. Before turning to face the door, he silently scowled at his pupil and said they would finish this later. Enter. He commanded. A young adolescent with spiky silver hair and ragged clothes entered. Before noticing the marks on the boy's cheeks, he had considered asking where Naruto was. His eyes briefly widened before becoming normal again. He gave the young man a smile. Hello Naruto-kun, he said cheerfully. He gestured to every Anbu present. Leave us, he ordered. He sensed the room's secret signature vanishing. He gave the boy another smile. Please, come in my boy, take a seat. Actually, Naruto remarked calmly, I prefer to stand. Oji-san. That's also fine, Naruto, was the tiny ball of energy that declared he would be the Hokage. Actually Naruto. He appeared so composed and at ease now. Is it possible that this is a good thing? Of course, it was a good change if Kyuubi wasn't influencing him. Naruto interrupted Hiruzen before he could reply. So, watch do you need, Oji-san? It's my appearance, isn't it? Hiruzen's expression became grave. Yes Naruto-kun, tell me, have you had any contact with Kyuubi? Does he have something to do with this? Here, Naruto was undecided. He could have told him. On the one hand, first of all, The elderly man was essentially his only relative. He had been with him for as long as he could remember and was responsible for teaching Naruto many of his worldly knowledge. He taught him right from wrong and was always patient with his antics. In addition, he was the Hokage, Naruto's commanding officer. You will be screwed for life if you lie to him. There was also the part of him that didn't want to share. The old man had lied to him about some crucial matters. Even though he had done a lot for him, he mostly made up the claim that he had Kyuubi in his stomach. He wondered for all those years why he had no family or friends to look after him. It hurt a lot to discover that he had known the whole time and had never told him. Did he not have faith in him? Had he lied about anything else? He finally came to the conclusion that he should be aware of the truth. If he later learned more than Naruto had previously told him, there would be repercussions. He had to tell now. No matter how he felt, if a commander didn't know what his troops were capable of, how else could he lead? Yes, he said at last in a neutral tone. Before you say anything else, Oji-san. He only activated the Kekkei Genkai, nothing else. His words caused Hiruzen and Jiraiya's eyes to enlarge. Genkai Kekkei? Unless you include his mother's unique chakra. Neither of his parents had one, however. Preliminary testing revealed Naruto had not inherited that. The elderly Kage, who had just recovered from what seemed to be his second heart attack of the day, gazed at Naruto gravely. And what perhaps does this Kekkei Genkai do? Naruto gave his neck a scratch. The third heart attack begins when the speaker says, "Sorry, it wasn't one Kekkei Genkai, but two." Hiruzen immediately concluded that he was unquestionably too old to handle this. His stomach was already starting to develop stress ulcers. He sighed once more and rubbed his temple. This was going to be a lengthy discussion. "Whoa, hold on there, kid," Jiraiya said. "What do you mean you have two?" Naruto looked towards Jiraiya. Oji-san, who the fuck is this guy and why is he here?" Jiraiya gave him a smile. He began to pull fans and wave them while performing a kabuki dance. "My name is known by millions in the world. Men call me sir out of respect. Women swoon from just my manliness alone." He slammed his hands on the ground and there was a giant poof of smoke. Now he was perched atop a massive toad. "Mount Myoboku Gamma's Holy Gamma Sennin, I am the gallant Jiraiya." As Jiraiya dismissed the toad, Naruto began to perspire at the action. Well, that was one question he really wished he hadn't asked. He turned to face his Oji-san. Hiruzen simply nodded and asked, "This is your student, one of the legendary three. And you trust him with what I'm about to tell?" "If it involves Kyuubi, Jiraiya is a seal master of the highest caliber. He even taught the Yondaime Hokage all he knew about Fuinjutsu, sealing arts. If anyone could fix a problem with the seal, it would be him." Naruto gave a nod of agreement. Naruto started to explain, resigned to his fate. Before either of them could respond, Naruto interrupted, saying, "We really wouldn't need him anymore though because the seal is gone. Well, technically it's still present, but it's just for show now." The Sandame, attempting to remain composed in the face of the boy's recent statement, asked, "Why do you say that, Naruto-kun? The seal is no longer functional. This might not be good." In that regard, Jiraiya was not doing any better. With no self-control in his voice, he said, "Kid, you realize what you're saying, right? If that seal has stopped working, that bloody kitsune could get out at any time." "No, he can't, Jiraiya-sama," Naruto said definitively. Observing the looks the two gave him, he sighed and said, "The Kekkei Genkai that made my appearance this way is holding him back. The Kekkei Genkai didn't have a name until recently when I decided to name it. I call it Akuma Soru, Devil's Soul. It has only been held by few in history. Basically what it does is turn us into what are called half-devils, people who are half higher demon, half human." He ignored their expressions of disbelief and continued, "One of the abilities granted to me is called Akuma no Ude, Devil Arm. This ability allows me to take a demon's soul and turn it into a weapon. Another ability called Akuma no Doka, Devil Assimilation, takes the power of that demon and gives it to me. So in a sense, I'm a Jinchuriki without a demon." The two elderly men gave Naruto a startled look. He simply informed them of his newfound half-demon status. That was shocking enough on its own. The worst part, though, was when he revealed to them what he had done to Kyuubi. They were unsure whether to call him insane or believe him. For the time being, the old Hokage decided to believe the former and asked for evidence. "Show us," he stated gravely. For now, it was the only way to know if this was true. Additionally, they had backup plans in case the Kyuubi attempted to flee during the attempt. It is better to address the issue now rather than later. Naruto closed his eyes and nodded. He opened them and spoke authoritatively, "Front and center, Kyuubi." They exclaimed as a tremendous chakra wave similar to the kitsune's was released. They witnessed Naruto's burning hands produce two-bladed chakrams. Parts of Kyuubi's power seemed to be released in waves by said chakrams. After exchanging glances, the two older men were certain that he was not making a joke. Now that Kyuubi had his power, it appeared that he planned to make the most of it. The Sandame told Naruto to stop after deciding it was enough with a nod. The young man made the weapon vanish. He showed them his left pectoral muscle, which had a fox head tattoo on it, by lifting his shirt. This is Kyuubi's sealed form. Any weapon I get is automatically sealed on my person into a tattoo-like form. Jiraiya inquired inquisitively, "Do you have any other weapons yet?" "Yes," Naruto said. "The other one is called Gilgamesh. I got the other one fighting the demon of the Forest of Death. Her name was Echidna, and she was a demon with the ability to control plants. She was the one who gave the Shodem Hokage the ability to use Mokuton, wood release. And the reason he built the Forest of Death because of the pact he made to get it from her when he was still young." "Naruto, do you have Mokuton now as well?" he asked without hesitation, forgetting what he had just said about one of his former teachers. "Yes," said Naruto without hesitation. "I have not been taught how to control it yet, however." They were shocked by this. This boy now possessed the Shodem Hokage's powers. He would also be able to stifle demonic power. The village would greatly benefit from having someone who could use the power once more. The boy clarified that these were just two of the Kekkei Genkei's abilities, but they were curious. The old Kage asked gravely, "What other powers does this Kekkei Genkei have?" "It has 3 other powers. Akuma no Kai, Devil Blood, and Kyuubi's healing ability give me an almost instantaneous healing factor for minor wounds and sprained limbs, which would probably take 5 to 7 minutes to fix if they were broken, and 10 minutes to fix if they were mortal wounds, but I might faint while they were being fixed. Sparda no Amu, or Sparda's arm, gives me the power to change my right arm into a demon's. I can make an ethereal arm to grab people with, or use it as a grappling hook, and so on. It has tremendous power. Finally, I have an ability called Debarutoriga, Devil Trigger. While in my normal form I have increased strength, speed, and reflexes, Debarutoriga multiplies those abilities by 3 times by turning me into my demon form. I have yet to try and figure out how long I can hold the form though, because I haven't used it yet." It took a moment for it to sink in with the 2 other men in the room, but they both immediately came to the conclusion that Naruto would become a powerhouse in the future with these skills. He would be extremely strong, probably stronger than them. The village would also benefit financially since they could use this ability to recruit him to carry out demon extermination missions. There were other, lesser-known demons in this era. Even though the Biju were the most well-known, villages would occasionally lose platoons in battle with demons to defeat one. Cages typically needed a backup to fight them. Even other Jinchuriki had to put in their best effort. However, if he trained others in this field as well, this young person could transform the business in that regard and increase revenue for the village. Then they recalled that he had yet to discuss another Kekkei Genkei. All they could do was speculate. "Thanks for the info, Gaki," Jiraiya said, "but I believe you had one other Kekkei Genkei that you wanted to tell us about." Naruto gave a nod. "Right. I haven't used this one yet, to be honest. I haven't practiced with it either. Hold on one second." He contacted Kyuubi. "Hey, Q, how do you activate the Rinnegan, Samsara Eye?" Kyuubi gave him a growl. "You moron," he yelled. "How do you activate any blasted dojutsu? Eye technique. Channel chakra to your eyes, Yubaka." "Thanks, asshole," Naruto said, closing his cold blue eyes and directing his chakra in their direction. Rinnegan. Naruto chanted. His eyes opened. His icy blue eyes had been replaced by pale purple eyes with a black pupil and 3 rings inside. Time for a heart attack, and Jiraiya actually joined him this time, rather than just the Sandame. The fabled eye of the renowned Rakudo Sennin, Sage of 6 Paths, was seen for the first time by Hiruzen. He could barely believe he was staring at it because it was so magnificent. The best part was that Naruto had it. Jiraiya had the impression that he was looking into the eyes of a ghost from the past. His eyes were identical to those of Nagato, one of his former pupils. The child's ability to switch them on and off was the only distinction. He was unaware of Nagato's fate, but he was now certain that these two were connected in some way. However, perhaps this one was unique. He wondered, could he be the child of the prophecy? Time would tell. "Is that the Rinnegan?" the old Hokage asked, a little hesitantly, emerging from his trance. "Yup, it is Oji-san," Naruto said positively. "Though I really have no idea of its abilities though. Kyuubi keeps saying he'll tell me later when he gets the chance. Now that I've finally used it, probably after this conversation is over." "And how would Kyuubi know?" the Sandame inquired inquisitively. The other two appeared doubtful. "He doesn't say how he knows, but since we began this partnership, he hasn't lied to me yet. Look, he told me that since I had demon blood, because of my family, and because of my personality, that I had his respect. I am placing my trust in him, and even if he was lying, he can't get out once he has become one of my weapons, so he has no reason to lie either." He had a point. Kyuubi had no reason to lie to him if his hold was as strong as he claimed. It simply didn't make sense. They could only rely on Naruto's judgment for the time being and observe how events unfolded. "Very well, Naruto-kun," the Sandame informed him. He saw the boy nod and turn off his eyes ability. Jiraiya and I will trust your judgment on this matter. However, if Kyuubi does try something, inform us immediately. Also, due to the nature of these abilities, this has become an S-rank secret. The punishment for revealing anything said outside this room will be dealt with swiftly and accordingly. He turned to face his pupil, turning back to Naruto. He said, "This includes you as well, Jiraiya. Use your devil abilities freely, Naruto. But be careful in how you use the Rinnegan. We don't want people to know about it just yet. However, if you have to, use it for emergency purposes." Naruto smiled at him and nodded. "Will that be all then, Oji-san?" Hiruzen gave him a smile immediately after saying, "Yes, that will be all. Have a good evening, Naruto-kun." Naruto left. He leaned back in his chair and sighed as the door closed. "I'm getting too old for this shit." Despite everything they had learned, Jiraiya had a slight smile on their face and said, "It's been a long time since you cursed Sensei." The elderly Sarutobi lit his pipe. They went on to talk about what had just happened. "Yes, well, I believe the situation called for it." With Naruto, at last, Naruto returned to his room. He closed the door wearily, went to the cot, and started to meditate. He needed to speak with Kyuubi. Inside Naruto's head, when Naruto opened his mind, he discovered that he was sitting in his own mental water with his enormous tails waving idly behind him. Kyuubi sat in front of him. Echidna sat beside him, appearing pleased to see her master. "Welcome, Naruto-sama," she said, grinning. It pleased her to see him. He was being so kind even though he wasn't needed. Even though she might be stuck here, this pleased her. One eye was opened by the kitsune beside her. "Hello, Kit," he said, "glad to be here. We have much to discuss." Naruto looked at them and sighed. "Yeah, I figured as much." In contrast, he was much smaller. The two demons exchanged glances before saying, "So, can you guys take human form or something like that? It's kind of a pain in the ass to talk to you like this." Light enveloped them until it subsided and human shapes became visible. Kyuubi was replaced by a tall, tan man who was at least 6 feet 2. He had glowing red eyes and a mane of long, spiky red hair like Naruto. He had 3 whisker marks on each cheek. He was wearing black pants and a red shirt. He had a big smile on his face. Beside him, a woman with green skin took Echidna's place. Her brown hair was pulled back into 2 long pigtails like the rest of her skin. Her adorable face was flawless. She had dark brown eyes. Her plump features were highlighted by the verses cut up top of her dark green dress. He thought she looked stunning. He said, "That you, Kyuubi, Echidna?" Together, they nodded. "Wow, you guys got perfect human forms. Especially you, Echidna. You look hot, babe. Though you did look cute in your demon form too though." She said, "Really?" in this smooth, silky voice. "But I thought you said I was ugly?" "I was lying to get a rise out of you," he said. Approaching her, she blushed and said, "But, you really did look beautiful." "Enough," Kyuubi said, adopting a rough voice in this form. "He came here to talk, not flirt. Now sit your asses down." "Oi, Fuzzy," Naruto said, grinning slightly, "who do you think you're bossing around here?" "An idiot that refuses to sit down," the man with red hair retorted. He saw them take a seat and said, "Now, do you want to know how to control those damned eyes of yours or not?" He was happy with the outcome and nodded his head. Naruto nodded and said, "Okay Gaki, so you want to know about the Rinnegan, eh? Let's move on to the actual abilities now that we have the history down pat." To begin with, the Rinnegan allows its users to control all 5 elements, as I had previously mentioned. You now have access to fire, water, earth, lighting, and wind techniques. However, in order to be able to combine them, you will need to capture additional demons. You can also employ the yin, yang, and yin-yang chakras. You can control your spiritual energy with Inten, yin release. It can be used for a variety of purposes, including attacks. You can use Yoden, yang release, to control your physical energy for similar objectives. Yin and yang chakras are both used in Onmyoden, yin-yang release. The Sennin's Banbutsu Sozo, creation of all things, which enables the user to essentially create anything he can imagine, is the source of all non-elemental related techniques. But this has nothing to do with the Rinnegan's 7 paths. Whoa, Naruto cut in. Hang on to their chief. Why the hell is he only known as the Sage of 6 Paths if there are 7 paths? Why not something like the Sage of 7 Paths? How the hell am I supposed to know? Kyuubi snarled at him. It wasn't us who gave him that name. It was the foolish humans. I have the most memories of Jubi when the tailed beasts were whole, which is the only reason I even know its fucking abilities. Now stop talking and let me go on. Naruto gave him a fierce look but let him go. As I mentioned earlier, the Rinnegan gives its user access to 7 paths, each of which has a unique set of powers. The Shirado, Asura path, is the first path, and it allows the user to summon or transform parts of his body into machines in an instant. Any part of his body could be transformed into a lethal weapon. The Rakudo Sennin used the second path, the Ninjendo, human path, to remove Jubi's soul from his body after the Sennin sealed it inside himself. The ability to pull souls out of people's bodies also gives the user the ability to read their minds, so if you're not concerned about killing the guy, you'll have no trouble taking the soul out. The Gakido, Preta path. The third path allows the user to absorb all attacks that are based on chakras. You can absorb any chakra-related attack. Furthermore, you can absorb a person's entire chakra when you touch them. It's a helpful ability to help you defeat your opponents quickly. The Jigokudo, Naraka path. The fourth path allows the user to summon the King of Hell, a being used to pass judgment on others. If the person you are holding is lying, their life force is sucked out and they are killed. If they are telling the truth, they survive but are left extremely exhausted. This is the ideal ability for interrogation. The Chikushado, Animal path. The fifth path enables the user to call forth any animal with a contract without sacrificing blood. Additionally, it allows you to sign an infinite number of contracts with that clan. Though you will need to sacrifice blood for each one, you can even call forth imaginary creatures with the last ability. That one is self-explanatory, so I won't explain it. The sixth path, and my personal favorite to be honest, is the Tendo, Diva path. This path allows for the user to control gravity. You can use it to push or to pull enemies toward you. You can also use an attack to repel everything, so powerful that it turned things into a crater. You would even be able to use an attack called Shibaku Tensai, heavenly body bursting from the earth, which will suck up anything in its path. Though if enough energy is fired at it, though, the attack will cancel out. It is my favorite because of all the destruction you can create with it. Kyubi giggled in a perverse manner, daydreaming about its ability to devastate things, whereas at his giggles, the former demon lord pouted playfully at having his dreams dashed when Naruto slapped him on the back of the head. Move on and stop giggling like that. You sound like an old pervert who sounds like he found the mother lode of all peep spots. Kyubi moaned to himself and went on. Finally, we come to the last path. The great and powerful Gedo, Outer path. Give the person the ability to transcend life and death. It takes a massive amount of chakra, which you are in no short supply of by the way, but it allows the user to revive people, even those they have not killed but who have just died recently while their souls still linger or are in the King of Hell statue. These are all of the powers of the Rinnegan. For want of a better term, Naruto was in disbelief. With the right training and all of these skills at his disposal, the possibilities were virtually limitless. He made the decision to put it into words for his friends. Well, shit, was all he could describe. Echidna laughed at the expression on her master's face. She made the decision to share her thoughts. She grinned at him and said, "Shit indeed, master. While you are here, we must also discuss your Mokuton training." Which reminds me, Kyubi interjected, a scowl set on his features. What possessed you to make it so the Mokuton could fucking suppress yokai? I had my fucking ass handed to me by that damn Hashirama Senju when that even bigger asshole, Madara Uchida, possessed my mind and summoned me to the Valley of End. Embarrassed, Echidna blushed. Well, he kind of tricked me into doing it. Kyubi and Naruto gazed at her. Naruto calmly questioned, how did he trick you into doing that? Well, when I talked about giving him the power originally, he asked what was useful about making trees grow from the ground or his palms know that he was like 7 when I gave him the ability, but the question he asked made me angry, so I stupidly told him I could give it the power to suppress demonic energy too if I had wanted. He bet I couldn't and I gave it to him. The only demonic power he wouldn't be able to suppress was my own, of course. She chuckled sheepishly. Kyubi looked at her sharply. So let me get this straight. You, a conniving demon, were tricked by a 7-year-old into giving him the power to suppress yokai? She sighed and nodded. After another moment of staring, Kyubi started laughing. Kami, my ribs, I can't breathe. Echidna's gaze lowered. She had been ashamed of it all her life. She would always be followed by the brat who was deceiving her, but when he felt a pair of arms encircling her, she was startled out of her reverie. Naruto was there. When she turned her head, she blushed intensely. This was the most genuine hug she had ever received. She had no one to do that for her, however. She found this sensation, this warmth, to be very pleasant. He smiled at her, making her heart race. It's okay, Echidna, he said softly. We all make mistakes. It is only natural. Nobody, human or demon, is perfect, so just relax, okay? She returned his smile. Happily, she said, thank you for your concern, Naruto-sama. He released her, and the lack of warmth made her a little agitated. He gestured to Kyubi and said, you're welcome now. While Fuzzbud is still laughing over there, tell me about Mokuton, won't you please? Kyubi nodded. Mokuton is the ability to use wood ninjutsu, ninja techniques. The user can create wood from anywhere, including their body. You can even transform parts of your body into wood. It also has the ability to suppress yokai from demon, Though they must be severely weakened to do it. This is the basics of the ability, however. It will take time to learn this and the other abilities I have to teach you. He smiled once more, making her blush more intensely. Don't worry, Echidna, I won't let you down. She pushed it aside and watched as Naruto approached Kyuubi, who was still laughing, and kicked him in the side, making her laugh. I know you won't, Naruto-sama. What is happening to me? When I look at him, I blush like a stupid human schoolgirl? Could I possibly like Naruto-sama? But it hasn't even been a day, she exclaimed. She might grow accustomed to this. Outside world, 5 a.m. Next day, Naruto got out of his cot and yawned. He stretched his legs and arms, then cracked his neck. He detested mornings. No, to be more precise, he had an intense dislike for mornings, but in order to reach one of those training grounds, he had to get up early. He had to get to one immediately because those were first come, first served. Before heading to the door, he put on the ragged remnants of his clothing. After opening it, he left and headed to the mess hall to get some breakfast before starting his training in his mindscape. He had spent a great deal of time with Kyuubi and Echidna, sharing stories and other tales with them and learning more about them. He discovered some pretty fascinating facts. For instance, Kyuubi enjoyed pulling practical jokes on others. They exchanged practical jokes, each attempting to outdo the other. 200 years ago, Kyuubi filled the men's bath with purple dye, which turned all of the men's lower halves purple. This was one of his favorite pranks for days on end. A few guys were forced to walk around looking like plums, but Naruto's painting of the Hokage monument in broad daylight, still regarded as one of the greatest practical jokes ever, surpassed that. Conversely, Echidna expressed his passion for gardening. Even though he was already aware of it, she was more than happy to respond when he asked her for advice on how to make certain things grow or give plants a different color or shade. By the end, she was a little taken aback when he told her about the plants he had grown himself. That had been a really pleasant way to speak with them. Through that experience, he realized that despite the differences in their strengths and abilities, humans and demons shared some interests and weren't all that different after all. He wolfed down the provided breakfast in a hurry and then proceeded to the level below. He turned the corner and went into the shinobi supply store that had been there. He was surrounded by a variety of weapons, tags, poisons, venoms, seals, and other supplies a shinobi might require. He approached and pressed the bell on the counter. A lanky older man dressed in chunin garb emerged from the back room. He gave Naruto a smile. Welcome, he said in a courteous manner. Naruto took a scroll from his back pocket and gave it to the man, asking, "How may I help you today?" Naruto said, "I need these supplies by tomorrow at the latest," while the man examined the scroll. The man turned his head back gravely. "This is a tall order, kid. All of these parts and supplies can be made by the village, but I don't know if it will be done by tomorrow." Naruto sighed with relief. "Very well then, adding up the totals for what you're asking to be made, the amount of time, and the level of craftsmanship, as well as delivery will bring you up to 3,000 yen. Naruto scowled. His account would suffer as a result. He would still have enough money for other living expenses, even though he probably wouldn't be dining out for some time. He gave the man a sheet of paper bearing his account number and nodded. After accepting it, the man gave Naruto a receipt. Naruto turned to head for the training fields and said, "Thank you for your business." He had given the man a scroll that contained parts he needed to make some weapons before he went to bed last night. He had sketched the designs of the necessary parts. They might take longer to arrive than he had anticipated, but he had been hoping they would arrive as soon as possible. Hopefully, the shopkeeper had been mistaken. He strolled past doors leading to different training areas. He went through the first door that was open, turned it shut, and then flipped the switch that indicated that the room was occupied. He turned to face the small, verdant training area that had been set up. There was a huge tree at the very end, close to the wall enclosing the ground, and a small pond close by. A team could comfortably use and practice on the training field because it was large enough. Good, since he was a one-man show himself. He sealed his hand. Approximately 200 clones emerged throughout the field, demonstrating Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique. He made them form a line. He said, "All right, here what's up," as if he were a commander giving an army briefing. "We've got a lot of new abilities and a small window of opportunity to work on them because who knows what'll happen next during this bloody exam. Now, I'm going to be giving you all specific duties. Each group will have a squad leader who will watch over training of the exercises. Now, form 10 groups of 20 each and line back up to receive your assignments." He assigned them their tasks after they had divided into groups. Group 1, you will be working on fire chakra exercises. Grab leaves from that tree and place them between your palms. Use fire chakra to try and burn them between your palms. Group 2, you will be practicing to control water. Grab a bowl one stole from the kitchen and fill it with water. Then try and make the water rise out of the bowl with water chakra. Group 3, you will attempt to control lighting nature chakra. Naruto took out a sealing scroll and opened 20 steel rods. Use these try to make electricity flow through the rod to the point where you can start to see sparks coming of it. Group 4. You will be working on the earth affinity. Your objective is to try and get small slabs of stone to raise from the ground with earth chakra. Group 5. You will be working on wind chakra. I want you to grab leaves from the tree and try cutting them with wind chakra. Group 6. You will be working on learning to control gravity. Each of you will take a pebble and try and lift it into the air without touching it. Group 7. You will be attempting to control Inten, Yoden, and Onmyoden. Use the exercises Kyubi thought for them also. You will be attempting to use Bonbutsu Sozo. Group 8. You will be working on using Mokuton by trying to make a small seedling rise from the ground. Group 9. You will be learning to use the abilities of the Shirado path. Finally, Group 10 will be doing various chakra control exercises. Are there any questions? A single clone held up his hand. What will you be doing, Oyabun, boss? Naruto gave them a smile. While you guys are practicing those things, I'll be working on physical ability and training with Echidna and Kyubi in their weapons forms. Are there any other questions at all? He smiled as nobody replied as he started his own training. The clones all raced toward their goals. Alright, let's get to work. Each of them had a lot of work to do. After 14 hours, weary and bruised, Naruto left the training grounds he had spent the entire day on. He had spent the whole day training with his clones before. He wouldn't have been able to go this far, but now he could do it with ease. He relished every moment of having the ability to do it as well. He had made great progress today. He had advanced to the point where he was confident that by tomorrow's end, he would be able to begin using D and C rank ninjutsu for each element. He had been able to lift a pebble off the ground and stay upright for 10 minutes in the area of gravity control. He would attempt to climb higher tomorrow by hoisting a bigger rock into the air. With his control over Mokuton, he had advanced and managed to raise a small tree off the ground. Although his control over Inten, Yoden, and Onmyoden was improving somewhat, he believed he still had a long way to go. He learned about wall walking and water walking through Kyubi, and his clones performed these chakra exercises. Lastly, his clones had been able to use the Shirado path to summon mechanical parts to attach to their bodies. But it would be difficult to transform body parts into it. All things considered, he had advanced significantly today. He decided that he really wanted to take a shower and would go to the mess hall later. Determined to get the dirt off his body, he headed for the shower rooms. After entering, he quickly removed his filthy clothes and put them in one of the available baskets. He saw Sasuke's clothes there too. When he put it back, he and Sakura have probably been wondering where I was all day. Naruto reflected. He smiled. He turned to face the open showers and said, well, if Imoteme tries anything, I'll just punch him out. I mean, it's not like he could kick my... Naruto's cognitive abilities came to a complete halt at what he saw. He was staring straight at Sasuke, his teammate, who was washing with his eyes closed and humming. But that wasn't the unusual aspect of this situation. He was looking directly at Sasuke's growing chest, which had two round, perky B-cup breasts that were still developing rather than a flat man chest. He wished he hadn't looked down and verified something. Sasuke, who was silently thanking Kami for preventing him from staring at another man's junk like he would in some dumb Yoi fanfiction, also lacked a penis at this point. He reached an intriguing conclusion. Sasuke was not a man, he was a woman, though. He smiled, deciding that if he was going to die, he should do so with a smile once more. If he was going to die, he would laugh as he said, my, Sasuke, jerking her out of her reverie and making her look at him. You've got quite a pair of breasts there. I really didn't know men had those. When will mine start to come in? In contrast, Sasuke felt ashamed. She had managed to conceal her gender identity from everyone for all these years. She had taken great care to avoid drawing attention to herself. She had even pretended to be ill on pool days at the academy, when they would go to a nearby pool to swim, to keep everyone from finding out. But when she was assigned to a team, things became a little more difficult. She would always swim and take baths apart from Naruto and the others in front of them. She had to be careful not to get wet to keep up with her male voice and appearance. She even had to employ a voice masking technique that she had learned from the Uchiha library. Nobody had any suspicions because everything had gone so smoothly. Today, taking a shower had been her top priority. She told Sakura a falsehood, claiming that she would meet her at the mess hall once she had taken a shower. Before taking a shower, she had even checked to make sure there were no men present. Not even the Naruto's arrival had reached her ears. She blushed as her mind turned back to the intruder. Naruto had been standing in front of her, grinning broadly, but she hadn't blushed for that reason. No, it was what Naruto had been concealing beneath his jumpsuit and shirt that had made her blush. She reluctantly acknowledged that he could work his growing six-pack. His physique was well defined and toned, but her face turned scarlet as her gaze drifted south. She had a single thought: big. At last, the situation and what Naruto had said made sense to her. She gave him a growl and started advancing on him. Naruto, she uttered, her voice a little higher than what he had recognized as Sasuke's. Naruto shut his eyes and bided his time, then the pain started. Team 7's room. A few minutes later, sitting opposite each other on their cots, Naruto and Sasuke stared at each other without exchanging words. The two decided to return to the room after the shower incident so they could discuss what had just transpired. Sasuke's tight navy blue shirt, which now hardly fit, revealed her nipples because she had neglected to bind her breasts. After the incident, Sasuke had been a little stunned. She never once imagined that she would need to explain this to anyone, much less Naruto. She now considered the boy to be both a rival and a friend. Sometimes they could tell what each other was thinking without actually exchanging words. Friends were just like that. How was she going to explain this now? Naruto had been thinking the same thing. The signs were staring him in the face, even though he already knew he was stupid. Who could he have missed, even when he was a moron? Now that I think about it, how come no one had ever even mentioned all the weird things he did? She never took part in swim days or baths with the other guys, and nobody ever asked. He thought about how to handle the situation, sighing to himself. Naruto finally broke the silence by giving her a feeble smile. So, he said cautiously, how long have you been a girl? She stopped perspiring. Since I could remember, she retorted cynically. He gave her a growl. You know, I'm just trying to take all of this in. She returned the growl. Maybe if you didn't ask stupid questions, then it would be a lot easier. Naruto realized she was correct. Just as he was about to respond, he took a step back, deciding that fighting was not the best course of action at this time. The question was modified by him. Okay, so why did you lie about this being a girl? She could have responded to that question, but instead she chose to pose a question of her own. Let me ask you a question. Naruto, what do you think would happen if an entire clan died out and had only a woman left to bring it back to life? Well, I really don't know, to be honest. Until recently, I really had not interests in clans or things like that. My only guess, however, is that they may wish to use you as breeding stock, setting you up with incredibly strong men, until you were able to conceive a male heir. Am I correct in this assumption? When he said that, all she could do was nod. The new Naruto's capacity for deductive reasoning both shocked and astounded her. It would take hours to explain this to the elder Naruto. This one simply seemed to understand what she was saying. Simply, that is correct, Naruto, she said. They would probably have a powerful shinobi impregnate me as soon as I reached childbearing age so that the child would have a good lineage. A male heir would then be produced and placed under the Clan Restoration Act. Who knows what would happen to me once a male heir was conceived. But the Sandame wouldn't let me experience that. To give the impression that my parents had a son rather than a daughter, he produced fictitious paperwork. He was the only one who could tell that I wasn't a boy because the other Uchiha had all perished in the massacre. He would never be able to get close enough to tell anyone, though, because he is a missing nin. After giving her a sympathetic nod, Naruto asked her a question she had not anticipated. So, what's your real name then? Huh, she said, unable to comprehend. I asked what your real name is. Sighed Naruto. What was your name prior to adopting the Sasuke persona? She pondered for a moment whether or not she could give it to him. Could she trust him? Could she put her faith in him? He was already learning a lot about her past, but she didn't really know anything about his. Perhaps a deal could be made here. How about this? I'll keep telling you about myself in exchange for you answering any questions I have about you, including about your Kekkei Genkai, she said, glaring at him. Do we have an agreement? In response to her inquiry, Naruto shrugged and said, of course I agree. At this point, he really had no reason to lie, and the Sandame only instructed him to keep his Rinnegan a secret. He made no mention of keeping Akuma Sora a secret. Now, he said, would you please tell me your name? My real name is Uchiha Sake. Naruto gave her a small smile before rising from his cot and approaching her with his right hand outstretched. Surprised, she said, what is this? With suspicion, she inquired. With a smile, he said, well, when people meet someone new, they signify it with a handshake. His explanation made her scowl. But you and I already knew each other. Correction, Sake. I know, Uchiha Sasuke, he said, gesturing with his index finger that what she had said was incorrect. But I recently met Uchiha Sake. You're opening up, Sake, he said. Laughing at her questioning gaze, he laughed once more and said, I do hope you don't have a huge stick up your ass like Sasuke does, though. I used to know the mask you wore that was called Sasuke, but now I look forward to getting to know the real you. She looked at him with a slight flush on her cheeks. She had never heard him speak in such a way before, but he still managed to maintain the same aura that he had when he was the old Naruto. This was one of the things she was gradually beginning to admire about her friend. He was the only one who knew the real her. Perhaps Sasuke would eventually leave, but for the time being, he had to stay. At least she had someone to really talk to about things now, though she did not like the stick up his ass comment, even if he was referring to her mask. With a frown, she said, yeah, well I prefer to have a stick up my ass than be class idiot, Doby. Teme. Bastard. He growled in a manner reminiscent of the former Naruto. She had just ruined their bonding moment. Now it was his turn to frown at her. She simply gave him a genuine smile in return, which unexpectedly caused him to blush. Arigato, Naruto, she said softly. He turned away, but nodded in acknowledgement of her gratitude. His face still flushed. She laughed at what she saw. Hold on, she just laughed, something she hadn't done since the Uchida massacre. She hadn't even squeaked when someone told a really good joke, but now she was laughing once more. Did spending so little time with Naruto like this really crack a part of her shell that much? So, he said gravely, if you're all opened up now, tell me, do you still want to kill that man as you so affectionately call him? Naruto sat back on the other cot and gave her another look. Yes, she replied without hesitation, but unlike my Sasuke persona, before I kill him, I want to know why he really did it. Saki's eyes darkened and a somber frown spread across her beautiful face. He responded to me in a way that was not typical of him. I'd like to know his true motivation. Naruto nodded in response. He didn't mind that she wanted to get even. After all, an eye for an eye made the whole world blind, but who was he to say whether or not the world should lose an eye? However, he still had a question. Who is him? None of your business, she said sharply, frowning at him. Naruto thought, and now we're back at square one. She was acting friendly and pleasant one moment, then brooding like her other persona. Then again, part of her had to go into that persona. Naruto thought most likely, she was just expressing her emotions. Yes, that was the definitive response. She had already told him a lot today, so he chose not to press the matter. Have you finished your inquiries? She inquired. Yep, he sighed, that's all for me. He grunted in agreement as she grinned slightly and said, good, because it's my turn to ask you questions. First question. What happened in the Forest of Death that gave you a Kekkei Genkai? Before I answer, let me ask why you're curious about it, Naruto said with a sly smile. Because you fall to your doom and the next thing Sakura and I know, we have a strange silver-haired kid claiming to be Naruto, but he's much stronger than the Naruto we knew. She scowled. From what I've been able to learn, it's clearly a body-based Kekkei Genkai, but I haven't seen it in action, so I'm unsure of its capabilities. Yes, a shinobi must always be prepared for any situation, he said with a persistent smirk. However, you will have a better chance if the enemy knows less about you in one of the upcoming rounds. I might be up against you. Why should I tell you anything about it? She was annoyed even though she had to concede that his point of view was valid. How about not breaking your promises, huh? You promised to tell me everything I asked, didn't you? Just as Naruto was about to respond, there was a knock on the door. Sakura's voice called out, Sasuke-kun, are you in there? Sasuke turned to face Naruto and said, we aren't finished with this conversation yet, in a tone that could not be denied. When he nodded, she became alarmed and said, but what can we do? I can't let Sakura see me like this. After he whispered back, then henge, transform, into something and I'll distract Sakura by getting her to leave. She nodded in agreement and hurried to Naruto's bed, where she changed into a little brown box. Sakura looked inside. Sasuke-kun. She glanced around the room, but all she saw was Naruto, who was waving at her while sitting on the bed with one hand on a brown box. What's up, Sakura? He asked courteously, moving his hand over the box and inadvertently touching Saki's breast, nearly making her groan. That's funny, I thought I heard another voice in here, Sakura said baffledly as she shuffled into the room and started to look around. She then shrugged and turned to face Naruto, frowning at him. And where have you been all day, Naruto? He surprised her by saying, I've been training, Pinky, and he had been aloof ever since the team was reunited and he had activated his alleged Kekkei Genkai. He had stopped calling her Sakura-chan, and telling her that she was gorgeous every hour, and he hadn't even bothered to ask her out on a date. She wasn't sure whether she should be happy that he had stopped or miss it. She had been viewing him somewhat differently ever since the Forest of Death incident involving Sasuke and the Oto Genin, which had caused her to consider the consequences of his failure to control that seal, feel a little sorry for her life, and believe that he might revert to his monster self. Naruto's emotional support would have been helpful during these times. Furthermore, she now felt uncomfortable with him flirting with other women. For instance, yesterday he had been talking it up with that hussy, Tamari, and she was blushing and laughing, almost feeling jealous. What was even more annoying was that Sasuke had been frowning during their conversation, which made her think that Sasuke must like Tamari, which is why she thought she was a hussy. Perhaps she could work with the former blonde to achieve their goals. She ignored those ideas and concentrated on Naruto. So, what kind of training have you been doing? You know, normal training stuff, he said cryptically, shrugging his shoulders. You know, that's not very specific, she scowled. And why are you now interested in what I do? With irritation, he inquired. What's causing your behavior? She inquired, obviously offended by the sudden separation he had created between them. I'm not sure. Sakura, how should I react to this? Sake and Sakura were both shocked when he asked in a bitter tone. You never cared before. Sasuke-kun this. Sasuke-kun that was the constant. Before, you never cared about me at all. With a sorrowful expression, Sakura said, Naruto, you know that's not true. And how on earth am I meant to know that? You never did anything but beat the living hell out of me. Yes, because you kept asking me out on dates when I've told you I don't like you like that. Sakura growled at him. Losing her previous expression, Sasuke-kun appeals to me. Perhaps she would have been nicer if Sakura hadn't always gone goo-goo-eyed over her and instead focused on her training to be an effective kunoichi. She could tell it was just a crush. All girls got them, except her of course, and she had never had one, at least not that she would ever admit to. Sake almost felt like groaning when she said that. However, she had never really noticed this before. Naruto had previously asked Sakura out on dates. Sake knew that he was a fool at the time, but did he really get turned down so frequently by Sakura? Even though she reluctantly acknowledged that he was a good guy, she beat him up for doing it too. Sake was genuinely a little angry at the pink-haired fangirl. Speaking of Naruto, she felt him grab her breast a bit more roughly, making her bite back a moan. Did he even realize where he was grabbing? If he did, she would definitely kick his ass later. At last, she heard him ask in a low voice, what is it that you like Sasuke so much? He wasn't going to tell Sakura that him was a girl, was he? If that bastard tells her anything, she thought angrily, already preparing ways to torture the former blonde if he did. What are you saying? Sakura responded with a question. With a frown that never left his face, Naruto turned to face her again and asked, I mean, why do you like him? What specifically do you and Ino perceive in Sasuke Uchiha that the rest of us, including the brilliant Shikamaru, do not? Sakura appeared to reflect for a moment before responding, because Sasuke-kun is just amazing. Every girl I know is fond of him. He is the last member of his clan, intelligent and attractive. Furthermore, she snarled angrily as she saw Naruto straining to contain her laughter, saying, What's so funny, Naruto baka? With a small smile in return, Naruto stopped laughing and said, Sakura, what you just described to me was not love, but a crush, and it sounds more like it's a shallow one at that. She asked, a little annoyed that he was questioning her love. What do you mean? In other words, you're essentially adopting everyone else's viewpoint in this situation. He stopped her as she was about to shoot back, saying, Sakura, what's Sasuke's favorite food? It's not love if you don't know a thing about him. Sasuke-kun hasn't mentioned anything of, she thought for a moment. Udon, Naruto blurted out, is Sasuke's favorite food. I'm not on the best of terms with Sasuke, but I know more about the person you love than you do, he said once in Nami no Kuni, Land of Waves, to Tsunami-san, who had offered to make it for him. He paused when he saw her eyes widen, then went on. That's so sad, he said with a small laugh. Naruto baka, stop talking, there's just one thing I didn't know. He got up and went to the door. Where are you heading? I'm going to go train, he said, turning to face her. I have to give things some thought. He walked out of the room, leaving Sakura and the unidentified Sake to ponder. One of them is why I even liked you in the first place. What was she doing wrong with Sasuke? Naruto was right. She didn't really know anything about him, and even when she had tried to learn something, he was always so aloof and cold. Sakura just stared into space. She had just learned something about Naruto from their conversation. He was a complicated individual in his own right prior to his transformation. He was weak and foolish, but now he was stronger than the Naruto she knew. He had a strong aura that was far more potent than Sasuke's, and the Naruto she had always known had never even considered what he had just said. What had happened to him, she wondered. Now that she had two mysteries to solve and both of them were members of her team, she got up and bolted out the door, determined to solve them, beginning with Sasuke. After she left, Sake undid the transformation and sighed, thinking, great, now I'm going to have to deal with her, as she looked for the chest wrappings, blushing slightly in the process. I can't believe he actually remembered that, she said. 3 days later, a shirtless Naruto sat in the training room where he had spent the last 3 days since his talk with Sake and his altercation with Sakura. He had only left the training area to take a shower and get something to eat because he wanted to stay away from everything. He had made great progress, and he would undoubtedly claim that he was faster than the typical Jonin and that his physical prowess was likely far greater than that of his sensei. Nevertheless, he genuinely believed that Kakashi might prevail in a duel because he had more experience, which Naruto would eventually correct. He had learned to use the fundamentals of the 5 chakra natures with his clones, and he had used some of his available funds to purchase a scroll that contained some C-rank elemental ninjutsu. He currently possessed 1 low-rank offensive and 1 low-rank defensive ninjutsu for each element, though they were not fully mastered, but he was confident in his ability to use them effectively. His skills with Mokuton, Inten, Yoden, and Onmyoten had only slightly improved. With Mokuton, he could now summon enormous trees by pressing his palm to the ground, but he had not yet learned any jutsu for the ability or how to turn parts of his body into wood. Inten was gradually improving due to the exercises Kyuubi had given him. He knew that Inten was essentially the control of one's spiritual energy. Continuous use, as he discovered from his clones, would cause an imbalance between the Yang and Yoden chakra. Onmyoten, a chakra used in all non-nature-related ninjutsu, was what he had truly enjoyed using for the Rinnegan's Bonbutsu Sozo technique. If he mastered it, who knows what he would be able to do. At the moment, he could only do small things like make different weapons and things like chakra chains, but he would eventually get the hang of it. Additionally, he had been practicing the Rinnegan's path abilities. Shirado had been progressing quite nicely, having finally been able to transform parts of his body into weapons and such, but now needing to figure out how to hold it for more than 5 minutes, which likely just required more training. He had finally been able to try his Gakido abilities, but his clones would try to absorb the chakra from the attacks and ruin them. The usage of said ability had only a 45% success rate thus far, so he shouldn't expect to use that in a fight just yet. The only other path he could currently work with was the Tendo path, and he shuddered when he thought about that one. He had learned from Kyuubi that the ability was a clever one the legendary Sennin had called Shinra Tensai, heavenly subjugation of the omnipresent god, which used repulsive force to level an entire area the size of the Forest of Death to a heap of rubble. It would be useful if he could practice it enough to reduce the time delay to use the next gravity attack, which he was currently at 1 a day. Kyuubi had estimated yesterday. While his clones were practicing elemental ninjutsu, one of the Tendo group decided it would be funny. He had responded to a clone's question about why they hadn't tried using the Chikushato path by saying that the area was too small for him to try, that he hadn't practiced it yet, and that he didn't want to take the chance of destroying the tower like he had almost done with that Shinra Tensai. Nevertheless, he had performed incredibly well over the last few days and was ultimately satisfied with the outcome. He got up and walked over to his clothes and supplies, which were spread out on the floor. He picked up a black muscle shirt from the ground and stared at it for a minute. Let's see, he thought passively, muscle shirt or impress the ladies with my rock in body. Tough choice. He decided to keep the shirt off, sealed it inside one of the storage scrolls, and proceeded to his supplies. He then picked up a black belt with the Konoha symbol as the belt buckle, slid it around his black Anbu-style pants, and attached a black pouch containing his shinobi supplies. It was a 2-barreled revolver that resembled his ancestor Nero's Blue Rose. It had black barrels and a black body. With a bloody red grip he had it modified so that, instead of taking bullets, it would take chakra, which, when fired from the barrel, would take the chakra channeled and shape them into chakra bullets. He also had it made so that it could take basic chakra natures, so he could turn the bullets into elemental ones. It had cost a lot, but, in his opinion, was worth every penny. He had named it Purotekuda, Protector. After putting the gun in its holder and moving on, he put different items in the sealing scrolls he had and sealed them into a larger sealing scroll before moving on to his last items. He took a pair of black fingerless gloves and put them on his hands before turning to the purple trench coat hanging from one of the brooches, which had the Konoha symbol patched on both arms. He slipped the coat on and activated the gravity seals he had etched into the fabric, moving around to get a feel of it before leaving the training area. He genuinely wondered what they were doing at the moment. Sakura was probably still upset about what had happened, but he honestly didn't care at this point. Sake was probably angry that he had left before he could complete their conversation, and he wondered if Kakashi had ever shown up to inspect the team. The intercom announced, "Would all genin please report to the main room for a speech from the Sandame-sama. Competitors who do not attend immediately will be disqualified from the exams," interrupting all of his thoughts as he entered the hallway. "So, Oji-san is finally going to let us out of this place?" Naruto smiled at what he had heard at last. It seemed like we had been here for ages. Knowing that he would now find everyone there, he headed toward the main hall. With everyone in main hall, while waiting for the Sandame to start his announcement, 8 teams formed a single file line. 23 competitors came together with the same objective: to be granted the right to be referred to as Chunin. The Jonin from different villages, including many from Konoha and one from Suna, Sound, and Iwa, stood in front of them. The old Hokage stood in the middle of the group, but he noticed that Naruto had not yet arrived. He turned to Anko, who had a clipboard in front of her, and asked, "Anko, my dear, is Uzumaki Naruto here yet?" "Afraid not, Hokage-sama," she said, shaking her head and grinning. Too bad. His blood tasted good too. She turned to face Team 7, glaring at Sakura and Sasuke, saying, if he isn't here in the next minute, your team is disqualified. All of the rookie genin appeared stunned, each thinking something different. Ino thought angrily, where are you, Naruto Baka? Sasuke-kun is going to be disqualified. Troublesome blonde wait, silver-haired idiot, Shikamaru thought indifferently. Oh. As he consumed a bag of chips, Shoji thought, well done, Shoji. Hey, blonde-haired idiot couldn't handle the pressure, grinned Kiba. This is unlike Naruto-san, though he is a very illogical person, Shino thought. Whereas, Naruto-kun, Hinata wondered anxiously. Sakura, obviously offended by what she had done, thought, I didn't think he was this upset, I have to fix this. Where are you, Naruto? Sake wondered, disappointed that he wasn't present. Alongside Kakashi, after spending some time using the Fujihoin, evil sealing method, to seal up the Ten no Juin, cursed seal of heaven, on Sasuke's neck, the Sandame told Kakashi and the other sensei what had happened when they arrived this morning. He explained that Naruto had supposedly unlocked a Kekkei Genkei that had given him a few more powers and allowed him to tame the Kyuubi, in addition to the fact that said activation had changed his appearance and personality somewhat, and he was actually interested in seeing it. I can't see it if he doesn't show up, however, he said. Sarutobi Asuma, the chain-smoking Jonin standing next to him, interrupted his thoughts. Well, Kakashi, he said with a hint of humor, looks like your team will be disqualified before they even have a chance to fight it out, all because of that Gaki of yours too. He seems to have picked up some of your habits from you, don't you think? He better not have, said Yuhi Kurenai, the red-eyed beauty who stood next to Asuma. I will beat him up if I see him carrying a small orange book around. I'll then put you in a genjutsu so powerful that you won't be able to escape, Kakashi. Kurenai-san, Kakashi casually replied, if he walks around with it, then it will be because he realized how great it is of his volition. He was about to turn the next page of his book when Kurenai scowled directly at him. Why did women not see the greatness of Icha? After a minute or so, Anko was about to disqualify Team 7 when the room's back doors suddenly flew open. At the entrance, I mean, you got the stage and lights, there's going to be entertainment, and you've got such a crowd of beautiful women, Naruto said as he walked up to where everyone was standing, his smile never leaving his face. You know Oji-san, he said, ignoring the shocked looks he was getting about his appearance. I may have to award you for this. I'm glad you approve, Naruto, Sarutobi said, slightly amused by his actions. However, you must line up with the other genin now. Sarutobi grinned at Naruto with a tick mark on his head. He was both happy that Naruto had actually shown up and a little irritated that he didn't need such a flash, loudmouth entrance. Naruto simply moved into line and stood beside Hinata, who was thinking a lot at the moment, and nodded before approaching his team, who were displaying a range of emotions, including relief, anger, and more anger. This is Naruto-kun, she thought to herself as she glanced at him. He looks and is acting so different. She blushed like a tomato when she saw that he had given her a seductive smile. He is very different indeed. Naruto heard two sets of yawns in his head and tuned out the old cage as he started talking, humming a cheerful tune to himself. Good morning, Naruto-sama. Echidna chirped joyfully. She had become somewhat closer to her master during their training with his Mokuton and learning about Gilgamesh's uses. She wasn't sure why, but she had just felt so drawn to him. The more she learned about him, the more she felt that odd sensation in her chest rise. It was almost as if she was drawn to him rather than his power, as most demons are. She planned to try and figure out this feeling soon. The giant kitsune in his head growled, my head. I feel like I just got run over by Shukaku after she had too much of her sake. That one time the great demon lords had gotten together. The Ichibi was a female. Huh? He saved that one to speak with Kyuubi later. He wanted to know everything there was to know about his tenant and his friend Gaara of Suna. Do both of you realize what time it is? He asked, sighing as he felt their heads tremble. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. In case you forgot, you asked me to make sake for you in the mindscape during my training. Kyuubi Echidna knocked the living daylights out of you after you got wasted and got into a small altercation with her over groping her. What did you do? In his mindscape, the great demon roared at her. You groped me, you baka, she replied, a little irritated. You're not going to get away with copping a feel. Woman, you have a lot of nerve. In addition, I was intoxicated. Is that meant to serve as an excuse for you? Before they started fighting, Naruto made the decision to intervene. You both shut it, damn it. Don't force me inside. I'll open a can of whip ass on you. They suddenly stopped talking. One of them muttered something about disrespectful Gaki, and another groaned something like, Naruto-sama is so strong. Was that just, Kyuubi interrupted him don't ask, just as Naruto was about to ask him another question. His hearing deteriorated to the point where he could hear the words, preliminary battles. At that moment, Naruto's smile expanded threefold. In order to gain battle experience, he began to listen in as their proctor, a sickly-looking man named Gecko Hayate, explained the rules of the preliminary round. He liked that there were no rules of engagement unless the proctor called the match for some reason, and that killing your opponent was permitted, albeit frowned upon, unless they conceded, in which case it was not permitted. Seeing that Kabuto, the man who had given them the information cards that had helped them before the first exam, had chosen to resign, Naruto remained silent about the matter, but for some reason he felt he could not trust the man because he had remnants of yokai on him, and where yokai was, there was a demon lurking nearby. He then started to listen again. We now have an odd number of challengers, so that means one person would not have an opponent. Hayate commented we're willing to give someone 2 chances to fight. He paused to give them time to process the information, but if that individual loses either of his matches, they will not advance to the finals. Are there any volunteers? Naruto's hand sprang up and he said, I'll do it. He was eager for some good fights and hoped to find one.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.